After a long day of filming, everyone wraps up and thanks each other for their hard work. Her co-workers notice Sasa has been rushing straight out lately, totally uninterested in hanging out, leaving them all wondering where she actually disappears to every night. Instead of heading straight to her room, she makes a beeline for the local coin laundry and settles in to kill some time. A tired guy finally walks through the laundromat doors, and Sasa immediately gives him a warm greeting, kicking off their usual nighttime routine under the fluorescent lights. Meanwhile, over at a packed family restaurant, the evening rush brings a chaotic wave of loud chatter and endless customer demands. That tired guy from the laundromat is Narita Rintaro, a 29-year-old waiter currently trapped in a nightmare gig featuring abysmal pay, forced unpaid overtime, and absolutely zero time off. His miserable situation all stems from a completely failed job hunt right out of school, which pushed him to gratefully accept a full-time offer from the manager where he was already working part-time. That eager acceptance quickly turned into a massive mistake, leaving him completely drained and running himself ragged on the restaurant floor. To make matters worse, another part, Timer casually calls out sick, forcing Narita to cover the shift while he desperately plots his escape the second he can secure a real job. His grand escape plan takes a massive hit when he checks his inbox and finds another brutal rejection email from his latest interview. Defeated and exhausted, he finally returns to his depressing apartment, utterly convinced that nobody in the world actually needs him. Eating his sad convenience store dinner, Narita lets the hollow, empty reality of his existence sink in. Watching an interview on his tablet, he wonders if taking any job at all would have been better than his current mess, tuning into a host, asking a guest about starting her career as a singer, despite being known for variety shows. The guest revealed to be Yoruzaki. Sasa bluntly confirms it, adding that singing is actually her main gig. On screen, the host notes her rising popularity and asks if she is actually enjoying all the TV work. Sasa shoots him down instantly, flat out, stating that it is all just a massive pain. Narita is totally caught off guard by her brutal honesty, thinking that is a wild thing to admit on air and marveling at how unapologetic celebrities can be. The host pivots to her performance, noting the edgy title of her new track, Not For You, and asking if she came up with it herself. Sasa proudly confirms she did, explaining that she likes how it gets straight to the point, since in her eyes, singing along to typical pop songs is just incredibly boring. The host starts sweating bullets, nervously asking if she makes a habit of dropping bombs like this on music shows while desperately trying to play off her attitude as just a quirky character trait the youth love. A barrage of live comments immediately floods the screen, with haters calling her boring, claiming she is only popular for her looks and questioning her fame, though Sasa watches the hate roll by completely unfazed. Watching the chaos unfold, Narita observes that while she clearly has die-hard fans, she racks up a ton of haters, just as fast, which totally tracks given her incredibly eccentric vibe. Desperate to save the segment, the hosts quickly pivot to the actual performance, hyping up the track for hitting a massive 100 million streams in just 10 weeks before officially introducing Sasa and her hit song. Sasa completely unleashes on the mic, belting out intense lyrics about fake realities and calling out desperate, faceless people who just pretend to have a purpose. Narita watches the performance in absolute awe, thinking she is such an incredible singer that she really ought to just drop everything else and stick strictly to music. Suddenly, a weird, dripping sound breaks his focus. He completely freaks out as a blob of food falls right onto his lap, groaning in absolute frustration as he realizes he just bought that shirt. Extremely annoyed by the mess, he quickly yanks the ruined shirt off and gets up to deal with the stain. Hoping for a quick wash, he presses the start button on his washing machine, only to get absolutely zero response, forcing him to smack the side of it while wondering if his appliance is playing a sick joke on him. He slumps over the completely dead washing machine in absolute defeat, muttering about his genuinely terrible luck. Staring at the massive mountain of dirty clothes already piled up in his basket, he sighs heavily and accepts that he really has no other option tonight. Grabbing his laundry bag, he heads out into the night and tracks down the closest coin laundromat he can find, hoping the place will actually be decent. Sliding the door open, he steps inside and immediately notices someone else is already waiting, completely caught off guard by the unexpected company. He gives a polite, awkward little nod to the girl sitting by the machines as he realizes they will be sharing the room for a while. The girl turns out to be Sasa quietly killing time on her phone, leaving Narita feeling completely awkward about doing his chores with someone else in such a cramped space. He decides to just hurry up and leave, but instantly gets stuck trying to figure out how to actually operate the complicated machines. While Narita completely fails to figure out the vintage washing machine and decides to just search for the instructions online, Sasa sits quietly behind him streaming her own performance, causing Narita to suddenly freeze as the wild realization of who she might be finally hits him. He nervously peeks over his shoulder to get a better look at the girl glued to her phone, desperately trying to figure out if he is actually standing in the same room as a massive celebrity. Sasa immediately notices him staring and looks up from beneath the brim of her hat, locking eyes with him, with her signature unbothered deadpan expression. Narita quickly snaps back to his phone, sweating bullets, as he tries to convince himself that he is just imagining the resemblance, completely unaware that Sasa is already walking up right behind him. She suddenly pops up right beside him, startling him into hastily hiding his phone, as she bluntly points out that his washing machine probably is not starting simply because he forgot to close the lid. Narita absolutely loses his mind internally over the fact that a famous pop star is casually talking to him, completely freezing up in shock, until Sasa leans in and asks if anyone is actually home in that head of his. After she reiterates that the machine absolutely will not run with the lid open, Narita snaps back to reality and confirms to himself that she is undeniably the real Yoruzaki Sasa, only to get completely thrown off again when she casually asks if he even remembered to add detergent. She offers him a spare detergent pod, explaining that these old machines do not add it automatically, but Narita politely tries to decline and buy his own, until Sasa dryly points out that the laundromat's soap dispenser has been broken since the dawn of time. Narita stresses over the stain, knowing it will never wash out with just water and mourning his new shirt, prompting Sasa to ask why he is overthinking a simple offer of regular soap. He finally caves and accepts her help, completely shocked when the usually serious idol actually cracks a genuine little smile at his awkwardness. With the laundry crisis averted, and the washing machine finally running, the exhausted waiter and the famous pop star settle onto the cramped bench side by side, silently waiting out the wash cycle together in the middle of the night. Narita silently questions why a massive celebrity is hanging out in a rundown laundromat, realizing she is actually incredibly helpful and completely different from her icy television persona. The two of them sit side by side in complete awkward silence as the ancient washing machines hum along in the background. Unable to handle the suffocating quiet any longer, Narita finally decides to break the ice and nervously calls out to her. He awkwardly asks if she actually comes to this particular coin laundry often, while she casually taps away at a game on her phone. She nonchalantly explains it is just the closest spot to her place, and that she rarely has the time to wash and dry everything herself, prompting Narita to ask if she does not have anyone at home to help out with chores. Sasa instantly waves off the idea, declaring that outside of her grandmother, absolutely nobody else has ever done her laundry, because she completely hates the thought of someone else handling her clothes. Realizing he might have pried too much, Narita quickly apologizes for asking something weird, but Sasa calmly brushes it off, admitting it is a totally fair question. Narita smiles softly to himself, finding it incredibly sweet and totally unexpected that a girl known for having such an icy television persona is actually just a huge grandma's girl at heart. Eager to keep the conversation going, Narita relates by mentioning his own grandmother back in his hometown, and brings up a delicious matcha soup she always makes, which Sasa immediately guesses is ozoni. Narita casually clarifies that it is actually just a simple red bean base, causing Sasa to completely blank out in confusion, as she points out that is literally just zenzai, while Narita earnestly insists it is the only authentic New Year's soup his family acknowledges. Narita pulls out his phone and offers to show her some pictures online, but Sasa remains completely unconvinced by his weird family recipe and exasperatedly asks if he couldn't just use a normal ingredient like white miso instead. Looking ridiculously smug about his red bean soup, he completely dismisses her suggestion and declares that his grandma's version is the only one that actually matters, earning a highly judgmental stare from the idol. Sasa immediately shuts down his soup's superiority, hilariously comparing his incredibly isolated culinary views to the evolutionary split of the Galapagos Islands, and explaining how completely disconnected his red bean soup is from normal regional variations. Narita bursts out laughing at her hyper-specific insult, completely amused by the fact that she just labeled his family's beloved holiday tradition as a weird evolutionary outlier. Checking the actual recipes online, Narita admits that the white miso and chicken versions actually look pretty amazing, leading Sasa to thoughtfully comment on how even a simple traditional soup has a massive diverse wave of options. Catching herself getting a little too profound over a bowl of soup, Sasa smiles warmly and teases him not to get all emotional on her leaving Narita, chuckling at the unexpectedly wholesome turn the conversation took. The two fall back into a comfortable, easy silence for a brief moment before Sasa suddenly speaks up again. She confesses that she actually really cherishes the time she spends just sitting in the laundromat, zoning out at the spinning machines, admitting that most normal people probably do not need a place like this at all. She explains that this quiet, mundane escape is actually incredibly important to her peace of mind, and Narita warmly agrees just as the washing machine cheerfully beeps to signal the end of his cycle. With the wash finally finished, Sasa gets up to grab her own clothes from the dryer, quietly noting to herself that the time actually flew by much faster than usual tonight. As Sasa finally opens the dryer to gather her things, she glances back over her shoulder and notices Narita quietly making his way toward the exit. Watching him wait outside through the glass, she realizes with a hint of pleasant surprise that he likely stepped out strictly to give her some privacy while she packed up her personal laundry. Standing out in the cool night air, Narita grabs a drink from the vending machine while quietly mulling over Sasa's confession about how important this mundane little sanctuary is to her. Reflecting on his grueling restaurant job, and the manager who originally gave him a chance, he smiles and decides to keep pushing forward, suddenly feeling a spark of hope that maybe someone out there actually needs him too. Safe inside the laundromat, Sasa pauses to look through the glass doors at Narita, waiting patiently outside, completely dropping her signature deadpan glare for a genuinely warm and fond smile. Sliding the doors open, she interrupts Narita right as he turns to check on her, completely catching him off guard by suddenly thrusting a bundle of fabric straight toward him. Sasa proudly holds up his freshly washed shirt, beaming with satisfaction, as she points out that the nasty food stain completely washed out. Completely unsatisfied with his underwhelming reaction, she playfully shoves the shirt right into his chest to force a closer look, leaving Narita totally flustered by the sweet smell of her fabric softener, and stunned by how remarkably different she is from her cold TV persona. Sasa then happily buries her face into her own freshly dried laundry, letting out a blissful sigh, as she declares that absolutely nothing beats the comforting feeling of warm, fluffy clothes. She insists that doing laundry at this specific spot gives everything the perfect finishing touch. Narita laughs and asks if she has compared it to a bunch of other places, but she instantly shoots that down by admitting this is literally the only laundromat she has ever used, leaving him chuckling at her hilariously biased logic. Sasa points out that although the washers and dryers at the laundromat are old and beat up, they are actually very reliable. She then softly admits that she would really like it if he came to like them too. Narita chuckles and teases her for sounding exactly like the shop owner. Sasa retorts that since she is basically the only person who ever uses them, this place is essentially her own secret hideout. Just as she is preparing to leave, Sasa suddenly pauses, realizing she almost forgot to mention something important. Narita sheepishly explains that he wants to find a way to repay her for lending him the laundry detergent. Sasa considers this and playfully replies that she will surely think of a good way for him to make it up to her. Sasa politely bids him farewell for the night, and Narita warmly waves her off as she heads toward the exit. Sasa offers some parting encouragement, reminding him that even though work can be tough, he needs to hang in there, which Narita quietly acknowledges to himself. Narita calls out that she is a total grandma's girl. He casually adds that this side of her is completely different from her usual public persona, making her incredibly cute. Sasa is utterly stunned, stammering back in complete shock and embarrassment over being called cute. Sasa immediately flees out the door in a panic, desperately rushing away, while worrying that her cool public image is ruined and her cover is completely blown. Meanwhile, Narita realizes he might have been a bit too insensitive and resolves to apologize to her the next time they meet. As Chapter 2 kicks off, Narita makes his return to the same old coin laundromat. Since his washing machine at home is completely busted, 29-year-old Narita Rintaru has officially made the nearest coin laundry his new go-to spot for chores. He notes that the rundown joint is actually a bit of a hidden gem since absolutely no one ever shows up except for him, and one other regular right before his thoughts are interrupted by the sound of the door. Right on cue, the charismatic diva herself, Yazaki Sasa, steps through the entrance and immediately offers him a polite little nod of acknowledgement. Narita politely wishes her a good evening, and Sasa returns the greeting before casually asking if he has been making a habit of coming to the laundromat. He quickly clarifies that it is actually only his second time visiting the spot, prompting Sasa to apologize for prying into his routine. Narita awkwardly brushes off her apology and tells her not to worry about it, though he is silently stressing over how his supposed peaceful getaway is currently occupied by a literal superstar. He mentally reminds himself that the girl casually doing chores right in front of him is an incredibly famous singer with a massive fan base. As Narita reflects on her exploding career and huge success across variety shows and movies, Sasa suddenly breaks his train of thought by flat-out declaring that something is completely impossible. Watching her relax, Narita realizes that Sasa genuinely enjoys hanging out at the laundromat and has probably been a regular there for quite a while. Sasa proceeds to just dump her entire bag of laundry upside down into the machine with zero finesse, leaving Narita completely baffled by her chaotic method before she suddenly freezes up. Digging around in her empty bag, she quickly realizes that she completely forgot to bring her fabric softener. Seeing an opportunity to pay her back for the detergent she lent him earlier, Narita immediately steps up and offers to let her use some of his softener. Sasa gladly accepts, pleasantly surprised to find out that he actually uses the exact same brand she prefers. She tells him she is going to use some, and Narita politely waves her on, awkwardly standing by as she gets her laundry sorted out. With the machines clattering away, Narita just stands there rubbing his neck, clearly exhausted from his incredibly long day at the restaurant. Sasa discreetly glances over at him from behind her phone, silently taking in how incredibly drained he looks. A quiet lull falls over them once again as they stand side by side listening to the steady hum of the washing machines. Steeling her nerves, Sasa tightly grips the edges of her jacket and nervously prepares to break the silence. Sasa nervously fidgets with her hands in her lap, quietly working up the courage to initiate a very specific childhood game. She glares intently with intense anticipation at an entirely oblivious Narita, waiting for the perfect opening, while he casually adjusts his newly washed clothes. Narita suddenly realizes that his clothes now the exact same fresh laundry scent as the famous idol sitting beside him, completely missing the fact that Sasa is quietly observing his every move. Sasa suddenly breaks the quiet atmosphere to ask if he has a moment to spare for a quick challenge, completely catching Narita off guard and sending him into a startled panic. They quickly establish the regional rules for the classic thumb-raising game, with Narita finding the nostalgic experience incredibly charming. When he questions her sudden urge to play something so random, she tries to brush it off casually, completely hiding her true motives. Her secret motivation stems entirely from a recent brutal defeat at work, where her manager mercilessly mocked her for losing the exact same game without scoring a single point. The harsh manager ruthlessly laughed straight in her face, calling her totally pathetic and overwhelmingly weak, while Sasa sat there vibrating in pure humiliation. The devastating roast reached its peak when the manager confidently claimed an elementary school kid could put up a better fight, leaving the idol completely seething with an intense desire for revenge. Snapping back to the present reality of the laundromat, Sasa firmly declares that she desperately needs the practice because she has a very specific, arrogant opponent to absolutely crush. Narita swallows hard, instantly intimidated by the terrifyingly dark aura radiating off the pop star, as he realizes just how seriously she is taking a simple casual game. Sasa decides that playing normally would be way too boring, so she boldly raises the stakes by demanding that the loser has to buy the winner an ice cream. She doubles down on her wager, bringing out her fiercely competitive side to ensure the snack penalty is officially locked in. Totally unfazed by her challenge, Narita confidently agrees to her terms, and declares he is ready to play. A sudden heavy silence falls over the laundromat as the two of them mentally prepare for their high-stakes battle. The intense atmosphere completely shatters when Sasa suddenly starts struggling to hold back a smug fit of giggles, leaving Narita entirely weirded out by her sudden shift in mood. She completely loses her composure and cracks up, struggling to push out a coherent apology, while an absolutely bewildered Narita demands to know what is so funny. Catching her breath, she finally admits that his awkward, stiff posture makes him look exactly like a handcuffed criminal, prompting him to instantly object to the hilarious insult. As she tries to wave off her giggles and apologize, Narita quietly notes how wild it is that an idol famous for her icy television persona is actually just a normal girl who easily cracks up over incredibly silly things. They finally launch into their rock-paper-scissors showdown, but Narita completely throws her off balance by blatantly announcing his exact move before they even throw out their hands. Completely ignoring her baffled protests, he mercilessly speeds right into the countdown, leaving a highly flustered Sasa desperately scrambling to figure out his weird psychological trap. Narita easily secures a win in the guessing game by accurately calling out 2, leaving Sasa incredibly frustrated, as she immediately accuses him of being a massive cheater. Brushing off her complaints, Narita casually defends his win as just part of the rules, making a highly irritated Sasa realize that there is a lot more psychological warfare involved in this simple game than she initially thought. Trying to turn the tables, Sasa announces she is going to guess one, loudly analyzing his facial expressions and trying to completely psych him out by predicting his next move. She aggressively kicks off the next round by shouting 0, totally catching Narita off guard and ruining his entire grand strategy in one fell swoop. The two immediately launch into a rapid-fire showdown, aggressively barking out their guesses as the competitive tension in the tiny laundromat completely skyrockets. Trying to play mind games, Narita boldly declares that he absolutely will not make a move next time, but Sasa easily sees through the weak bluff and hits him with a terrifyingly confident smirk. The intense round abruptly ends with a decisive call of 1 officially locking in the final move of their heated battle. Sasa completely explodes with excitement over her hard-earned victory and the sweet promise of an ice cream prize, leaving Narita totally baffled by how quickly she shifted from a cold-blooded competitor to a hyped-up kid. Riding the high of her complete dominance, a cocky Sasa boasts that his dirty tricks never stood a chance against her, leading Narita to silently note just how intensely she hates losing. The wild energy immediately fizzles out when Narita awkwardly tries to say something, snapping Sasa out of her massive ego trip and making her shyly apologize for getting way too invested in a silly midnight game. Narita warmly encourages her, pointing out that it is actually totally fine to get incredibly serious about silly things like this. Sasa giggles in complete agreement, officially locking in and getting totally hyped for the challenge ahead. Confidently declaring that she finally has the hang of things, Sasa instantly drops into an intense state of hyper-focus, leaving Narita completely amused as he watches her fiercely grumble to herself. Fast forward to the television studio, where Sasa's manager absolutely loses her mind, brutally calling the idol out for being completely terrible at something. The frustrated manager points out that Sasa just racked up 8 massive losses in a row, begging her to stop, because watching her fail this badly is getting genuinely painful. Completely defeated, the young idol stews quietly in absolute shame. Overwhelmed by sheer frustration, Sasa mentally agonizes over the brutal fact that she completely failed to get her long-awaited revenge. A flashback reveals Sasa right in the middle of filming a massive variety show segment, where the host enthusiastically explains the rules of a high-stakes game. He reveals that hidden among the cheap 100-yen products on the table are a few incredibly expensive items, and the guests are forced to pay out of pocket for whatever they end up picking. As the announcer challenges the contestants to identify the pricey traps hidden among the random trinkets, Sasa intensely locks onto the table, determined to finally spot a fake and prove her worth. Just as another contestant tries to claim an item, Sasa completely beats her to the punch, confidently snatching up a flashy jewel and locking it in as her ultimate choice. The host quickly warns her that getting it wrong will cost her a massive amount of cash and asks if she is absolutely sure about her bold move. Trying to play it completely cool, Sasa insists that it will be fine and tells him to just ring it up, kicking off the suspenseful reveal of whether she just scored a cheap trinket or fell right into a brutal financial trap. The cashier scans the fancy antique and instantly freezes in shock as a dramatic drumroll begins to echo through the store. The suspense continues to build as the surrounding customers stare in absolute disbelief, though the manager simply watches the chaotic reaction with a highly confident and knowing smile. Sasa stands perfectly still, waiting in deadpan silence for the impending financial damage to finally be revealed. The scanner officially registers the barcode with a sharp beep, locking in the final tally. Sasa completely shorts out when the register displays a staggering 324,000 yen, leaving her staring blankly at the screen in utter shock. The cashier cheerfully announces the massive total to the entire room, entirely destroying any hope that the exorbitant price tag was just a simple mistake. While the manager proudly explains that the item is a certified French antique masterpiece, Sasa internally spirals into a massive panic, desperately hoping that the insane price is just a joke for the cameras, and she will not actually have to empty her bank account. The manager happily prompts her to settle up at the register, leading Sasa to nervously peek into her wallet, only to discover a terrifyingly low stack of bills. She awkwardly confesses that she is totally short on cash, instantly sparking hushed gossip from the older customers about her inability to pay, while she silently prays for an absolute miracle to bail her out. Right on cue, the manager steps up and generously offers to spot her the cash, a highly dramatic save that Sasa totally saw coming from a mile away. Sasa ends up making the massive purchase, but she has to rely on her manager to front the cash as a loan, which will be painfully deducted straight out of her future paychecks. Back in her dressing room, Sasa internally freaks out over being slapped with a massive 324,000 yen bill, while her manager just laughs off her obvious distress. Her manager continues to tease her, asking what she would have actually done if she didn't have the cash on hand to bail her out, joking that she is always such a huge handful to deal with. Later that night, a completely drained Sasa retreats back to her favorite coin laundromat in her casual clothes, quietly staring at the insanely expensive item she was forced to buy. She holds up a massive, gaudy, jeweled ring to the light, absolutely baffled that she actually ended up paying for it, and deeply questioning if the tacky accessory is truly worth the insane price tag. While she sits there muttering to herself about the supposed antique, Narita slides the glass door open and gives her a polite evening greeting, completely startling her out of her grumpy trance. Trying to play it cool, she quickly raises the gaudy ring up to the light to show it off as Narita casually steps inside with his laundry bag. Sasa continues to glare intensely at the jewelry, leading Narita to awkwardly glance over in confusion and wonder if the idol is just in a totally terrible mood today. Unable to contain his curiosity, he cautiously asks what is up with the giant ring, prompting Sasa to immediately vent that her job absolutely forced her to buy the tacky thing completely against her will. Narita laughs awkwardly, instantly connecting the dots, that it was probably just some crazy stunt for a variety show shoot, and sympathetically agrees that dealing with that kind of ridiculous industry nonsense has to be incredibly rough. Sasa suddenly pulls out a fancy-looking brooch and thrusts it right in Narita's face, bluntly demanding to know how much he thinks the accessory is actually worth. Narita admits he has absolutely no clue about jewelry, but after Sasa drops it into his palm for a closer look, he hazards a guess that it does not look particularly expensive and might be worth around 8,000 yen. Sasa instantly shuts down his lowball estimate, casually revealing the brooch actually costs a staggering 324,000 yen, sending Narita into an absolute panic over holding such a ridiculously expensive item. Terrified of dropping it, Narita quickly hands the brooch back and sympathizes with the brutal out-of-pocket cost, prompting Sasa to vent about how much the situation sucks and call it total power harassment, since she cannot believe the dumb accessory is worth that much. Sasa suddenly pivots and asks Narita to guess the price of her boots, offering them as a prize. If he gets it right, though, Narita immediately declines, since he has no use for women's footwear and feels it would be totally wrong to just flip a celebrity's used boots online. Narita logically points out that she would have no way to get home if he actually won the guess, but Sasa nonchalantly claims she would just walk home barefoot, leaving him completely baffled by how casually she says something so ridiculous. While Narita stresses over the sheer absurdity of sending a young girl home completely barefoot, he decides to ask what the penalty would actually be if his guess turns out to be wrong. Sasa flashes a highly mischievous, smug grin, and reveals that the only punishment is that she will ruthlessly laugh at his complete lack of observational skills, leaving Narita utterly perplexed by her bizarrely confident attitude. Realizing there is basically no real risk for him, Narita agrees to play along, prompting Sasa to simplify the rules to a basic game of high or low, so he actually stands a fighting chance without needing a massive hint. Narita asks for the starting baseline price to kick off the game, and Sasa sets the bar right down the middle at 60,000 yen to let him make his high or low guess. Narita deeply analyzes Sasa's boots, completely convinced that since she is a famous idol, she must have dropped some serious cash on high-end designer footwear. Committing to his grand theory, Narita confidently guesses the boots cost well over 60,000 yen, prompting a sly grin from Sasa, as she dramatically asks if that is his final answer. He firmly locks in his guess without a single second of hesitation, totally certain he has her expensive celebrity tastes completely figured out. Sasa immediately shoots him down with a cheerful shout, revealing the boots actually cost a measly 2,990 yen, and leaving Narita utterly shocked by the bargain bin price. Bursting into laughter, Sasa mercilessly teases him for completely failing to spot the cheap price tag, while a deeply annoyed Narita curses himself for being so easily blinded by her fame. Still totally baffled, Narita questions how leather could possibly be that cheap, until Sasa happily explains they are just a faux leather fast fashion grab, proving she is totally cool with budget shopping. Eager to keep the momentum going, Sasa announces it is her turn, and raises the stakes by offering to buy him a juice if she loses, excitedly demanding he present his item. Narita hands over his simple black wallet and sets the baseline price at 30,000 yen, prompting an intrigued Sasa to ask for a much closer look to properly judge its worth. Taking the wallet from his hand, Sasa goes into full detective mode and meticulously inspects the craftsmanship, while Narita watches closely to see if she will take the bait. Carefully examining the worn interior, Sasa deduces that the wallet has been heavily used since his student days, immediately questioning if a broke college kid could ever realistically drop 30 grand on an accessory. Sasa confidently locks in her guess, asserting that the item is definitely worth less than 30,000 yen. Narita asks if she is absolutely sure about her final answer, but right as she starts to confirm, a sudden realization completely stops her in her tracks. Frantically backtracking, Sasa realizes that if the item is so incredibly worn out, it must actually be high quality to have lasted this long. Completely panicking, she immediately changes her mind and shouts that it has to be worth more than 30,000 yen. Narita calmly double-checks if she is completely certain about this new choice, and a nervous Sasa hesitantly confirms that it is her final answer. Narita happily buzzes her out, revealing that she was actually right the first time, and the item is worth less than 30,000 yen. Furious at herself for changing her guess, Sasa immediately clicks her tongue and curses, leaving an amused Narita to point out her sudden foul mouth. Still annoyed over her loss, Sasa immediately demands to know exactly how much the item in question actually cost. Narita reveals that his heavily worn wallet was just a cheap 7,000 yen gift from his mom when he got accepted into university, making Sasa realize he has just been taking incredibly good care of a sentimental item. Trying to play off her defeat, she stubbornly pouts that she didn't even want any juice anyway, while a grinning Narita points out that she completely overthought her entire strategy. Refusing to end the game on a loss, Sasa immediately declares that it is her turn next and grabs her dangling earring to use as her item. She confidently challenges him to figure out whether the piece of jewelry is worth higher or lower than 50,000 yen, leaving Narita thoughtfully pondering his answer. The story jumps forward as a thoroughly exhausted Narita arrives at the restaurant in his work uniform, heavily sighing about how incredibly rough his day has already been. After finally getting a second to breathe, he heavily slumps back into a chair in the break room, letting out a massive sigh of relief as he desperately tries to rest his tired body. Left staring at the flashy prize, Narita admits that he technically guessed the price correctly, but genuinely wonders what on earth he is actually supposed to do with it. Sasa confirms his guess was spot on, revealing that she ended up buying the earrings for around 80,000 yen, and happily celebrates her little victory, even though she notes it was basically a total coin toss. Without any warning, Sasa suddenly removes the expensive jewelry right off her own ear. She casually hands the incredibly pricey earrings over to him, telling him to just take them, while Narita lets out a completely confused gasp. Instantly panicking over the massive price tag, Narita frantically tries to refuse the gift, reminding her that simply handing over 80,000 yen worth of jewelry to a random guy is absolutely insane. Sasa smoothly brushes off his concern, explaining that it was just a silly penalty game anyway, and that she only dragged him along to keep herself distracted, insisting that he just accept the gift without overthinking it. Announcing that it is finally time for her to head home, she casually suggests that he just sell the earrings or regift them to someone else if he really does not want to keep them. Offering a polite little bow, the idol bids him a casual farewell and makes her exit into the night. The next morning in the restaurant break room, Narita stares down at the ridiculously expensive jewelry and logically considers just selling it, since he obviously has no use for earrings, right as the staff room door suddenly swings open. The newcomer is his co-worker Satanaka Rimi, a 21-year-old university student, universally known as the absolute angel of their restaurant staff. She cheerfully greets him for their shift and immediately spots the flashy jewelry in his hand, gushing over how cute it is, while Narita awkwardly tries to figure out how to explain the expensive item. Narita casually offers the fancy earring to his co-worker, totally catching her off guard, as she asks if he is really sure about giving it away. Brushing off her hesitation, he explains it is just a simple thank you gift for always working so hard, prompting her to eagerly accept the jewelry and try it on immediately. She excitedly shows off her new accessory and asks for his opinion, completely beaming with happiness when he politely tells her it looks great. Unbeknownst to them, Sasa is secretly watching the entire happy exchange through a crack in the door, glaring intensely from the shadows. The innocent gesture immediately spirals into a wild rumor among the rest of the staff, who start whispering that the jewelry was actually a rejected present from a brutal breakup, quickly dubbing it the rejection earring. Meanwhile, back at the laundromat, Sasa quietly sits on the bench rocking the exact same earring. She happily taps the jewelry and shows it off to Narita, wearing an incredibly smug and satisfied expression. The heavy washing machines clunk away in the background as another quiet, comfortable night settles over their favorite neighborhood laundromat. Finding himself genuinely looking forward to their little midnight meetups, Narita settles back into his usual spot at the laundromat to tackle another load of clothes. The familiar rattle of the door announces Sasa's arrival, just as Narita gets completely engrossed in a shonen manga that one of his younger co-workers highly recommended. Sasa walks in totally absorbed in a serious phone call, firmly assuring the person on the other line that she has plenty of time to handle a massive upcoming project before finally hanging up. The second the call disconnects, she drops onto the bench with a heavy thud and lets out a massive sigh, agonizing over a brutal 3-day deadline that is completely draining her. With a hollow, dead-eyed laugh, she starts genuinely contemplating just throwing in the towel and ditching everything, prompting Narita to immediately decide it is way safer not to ask about her terrible day. Glaring at her jam-packed digital calendar, she mentally curses her management for demanding new lyrics, while simultaneously drowning her in endless TV shoots and impossible deadlines. Desperate for a distraction from her scheduling nightmare, she finally notices Narita fully absorbed in his book and casually asks if the manga is actually any good. Narita happily confirms it is great, explaining that a part-timer at the restaurant lent it to him, and he is already completely hooked on the story. Intrigued by his glowing review, Sasa quietly hums in interest and subtly locks her eyes onto the paper shopping bag resting right next to him. Without skipping a beat, she leans over and starts shaking the bag, silently investigating its contents with completely unapologetic curiosity. Sasa notices that Narita is completely absorbed in the manga he is reading and thinks to herself that he is absolutely hooked. Apologizing for interrupting his reading, Sasa catches Narita's attention as they sit quietly together. She asks him what exactly he likes so much about that specific manga, catching him completely off guard. When she presses him for an answer, Narita nervously responds that he just likes the usual standard stuff. Sasa admits that was not the answer she was expecting, prompting Narita to defend his taste by arguing that the standard popular tropes can still be really good. Sasa quickly fires back that he completely misunderstood her, demanding that he give her a much more specific answer about what makes the story so appealing to him. Narita points out a specific moment in Volume 5, where the main character, carrying all the hopes and dreams of his friends, heads off to battle a powerful enemy. He excitedly explains that the scene gave him absolute chills, and Sasa completely agrees. While Narita keeps talking, Sasa quietly types the phrase into her phone, repeating the words about carrying everyone's hopes and dreams. Surprised by her reaction, Narita asks if she is actually reading the series too, and Sasa reveals that she has actually caught up to the very latest chapter for some personal reasons. She notes that he must still be on Volume 7, though Narita points out that the series is actually all the way up to Volume 12, with Sasa simply agreeing as they continue chatting. Sasa casually observes his progress and bluntly points out that he is getting dangerously close to the exact part where the master character gets killed off. Realizing what she just said, Narita instantly freezes up in pure dismay as the massive spoiler completely ruins the upcoming twist. Narita loudly calls her out for dropping such a massive spoiler right to his face, but Sasa completely misses the point and calmly assures him that she personally does not mind spoilers at all. Flabbergasted by her bizarre logic, Narita immediately fires back that she has absolutely no right to be the one saying that, since he is the one getting his story ruined. Trying to justify her cruel behavior, Sasa sighs and shamelessly admits that she has just been incredibly stressed with work lately and desperately needed a victim to dump all her gross negative feelings onto. Unimpressed by her toxic coping mechanism, Narita flatly refuses to accept her awful emotional delivery, though Sasa simply chuckles to herself in satisfaction. Shifting the focus, Narita asks if it is all right for him to take a quick look at something in her bag, and Sasa casually gives him the green light. He reaches in and pulls out a copy of a magazine, eagerly flipping through the pages to see what she is reading. Sasa quietly mutters that the material is actually a genuinely interesting read entirely aside from the fact that it is related to her job. Catching onto her slip-up, Narita immediately zeroes in on the word work, while staring directly at the massive anime adaptation announcement printed right on the cover. Connecting the dots, Narita gives a knowing smile and casually asks if she is going to be writing the official theme song for the upcoming adaptation. His wildly accurate guess hits Sasa like a ton of bricks, leaving her completely shocked and internally panicking over how easily he figured it out. Desperately scrambling to cover her tracks, Sasa stammers out a terrible denial and insists he is entirely mistaken while awkwardly attempting to whistle away the tension. Watching her ridiculously suspicious reaction, Narita mentally notes that he absolutely hit the nail right on the head. Refusing to let it go, Narita playfully presses her again, pointing out that she just admitted she had to read it for her job. Sasa tries to deny everything in a completely panicked falsetto, instantly cringing at her own terrible acting and agonizing over the fact that her massive voice crack definitely gave away the entire secret. Utterly defeated by her own terrible lying skills, Sasa nervously fidgets in place, completely unable to make eye contact, as she awkwardly shuffles her boots against the laundromat floor in pure embarrassment. Realizing she has completely lost all her composure, Narita decides it is best not to dig any deeper into her confidential work projects, and smoothly pivots the conversation by asking about her favorite character. Grateful for the sudden out, Sasa immediately latches onto the distraction and pretends to be deeply engrossed in rereading the pages just to hide her wildly flustered face. Sitting together in the quiet laundromat, Sasa ponders the concept of favorite characters, while Narita admits he has never really given the topic much thought. Narita elaborates on his tastes, sharing that he has a soft spot for the supportive mentor archetype. He admires how those strong characters push the protagonist to grow, finding that kind of reliable role highly respectable. The idea of a supportive senpai driving character growth immediately resonates with Sasa, hitting her with a sudden wave of creative inspiration. She realizes that instead of stressing over the entire narrative, focusing on individual character perspectives might be exactly what she needs. With a new creative spark ignited, Sasa completely locks in and begins furiously typing away on her phone. Narita tries to warn her that she should probably start her dryer first, but she is so deep in the zone that his voice does not even register. Seeing that she is entirely consumed by her work, Narita decides to leave her to it and quietly gathers his own things. He heads over to the machines to finish up his chores without interrupting her flow. As Sasa remains completely engrossed in her screen, Narita slings his laundry bag over his shoulder, getting ready to head out and let her work in peace. Sasa quietly sets down a can of black coffee on the bench as a silent gesture of gratitude before he heads out. Narita catches the thoughtful gift and smiles to himself as he leaves, silently cheering her on and looking forward to whatever she officially releases next. Back inside the laundromat, Sasa hovers her thumb over the screen, ready to officially send off her newly completed work. She throws her arms up in pure joy, celebrating the sweet relief of finally getting her project completely finished. Turning around to the moment, Sasa is startled to find the bench empty, only to spot the canned coffee sitting where Narita was. Half convinced her laundromat companion has somehow transformed into a beverage, she offers a respectful bow of thanks to the black coffee. Calling her manager from the laundromat, Sasa casually mentions that she just sent the brand new lyrics over for review. The manager is completely blown away when she checks her inbox, loudly praising Sasa as an absolute genius for finishing them so incredibly fast. Sitting alone on the bench, Sasa beams with pride and humbly accepts the massive compliment, completely hiding her secret source of inspiration. Back at the agency, the manager promises to forward the fresh lyrics for final confirmation and congratulates the idol on a job well done. Sasa calmly ends the call and settles back onto the bench, quietly sipping her canned black coffee in complete satisfaction. A few months quickly fly by. Standing in his apartment late at night, Narita pulls up a video streaming app on his phone, noting to himself that the brand new anime featuring Sasa's latest opening track has finally aired. As he listens to the edgy song, the intense lyrics about shattered hearts and cutting through harsh fate pop up on his screen, causing Narita to stare at his phone in absolute dawning realization. He awkwardly chuckles to himself, realizing that the dramatic lyrics are actually the exact same edgy phrases he said to her during one of their late-night laundromat chats. Remembering how Sasa enthusiastically thanked him for the great material back, then he admits it feels incredibly bizarre to hear his own embarrassing venting transformed into a massive hit song. Late into the night, the chaotic dinner rush at the family restaurant finally dies down, leaving only a few quiet customers lingering in the booths as the clock ticks past 11. As Chapter 5 officially begins, Sasa's stressed-out manager is revealed to be sitting alone at one of the restaurant tables, frantically typing away on her laptop, as she uses the quiet space to catch up on her endless workload. She lets out an exhausted sigh while staring at her glowing screen, completely unaware that an equally drained Narita is just stepping out from the back room to tend to the dining area. Sasa's manager, 29-year-old Kusaka Ryo, busily taps away on her laptop, while handling a phone call about a pressing deadline, casually ringing the table bell for service without missing a single beat. Juggling her relentless schedule, Kusaka confidently assures the caller she can easily knock out the task, only to instantly groan in annoyance as another incoming call forcefully buzzes her phone. Still totally glued to her screen and deep in conversation, she barely notices when the waiter arrives to drop off a matcha parfait. Finally, firing off her message, she gives the waiter a quick distracted nod as he politely checks if she needs anything else before leaving her to enjoy the dessert. Victoriously stretching her arms into the air, Kusaka enthusiastically declares that all her stressful work is finally finished, but her celebration abruptly halts when she actually glances down at her table. Staring down at the dessert, she completely slumps in defeat, groaning that the matcha parfait is totally wrong and immediately regretting not paying attention when the waiter brought it over. Resting her head on her arms, she silently debates just eating the wrong dessert anyway to avoid the hassle, though it still intensely bugs her that the kitchen messed up her order. Overthinking the entire situation, she desperately tries to convince herself to just accept the matcha parfait, absolutely dreading the idea of sounding like a nagging customer, while complaining about the unfair stress of having to correct a simple mistake. Letting out a massive sigh of complete exhaustion, she dramatically slumps back into her booth, instantly catching the eye of Narita, who notices her distress from across the restaurant floor. Narita quickly steps up to check on her, and Kusaka awkwardly chuckles while pointing out the wrong order, sending the exhausted waiter into an instant panic as he frantically apologizes for the mix-up. While working his exhausting shift, Narita is stopped by a customer who politely points out that she actually ordered the strawberry dessert instead of the matcha one he just brought out. Checking the receipt, Narita realizes the order was printed perfectly, making the mistake entirely the kitchen's fault, and leaving him kicking himself for not double-checking the tray before delivering it. He immediately offers a deep, panicked apology and bolts back to the kitchen to get the order corrected right away, leaving the customer slightly startled by his sudden dramatic sprint. As she waits the customer, who happens to be Sasa's stressed manager, Rio quietly reflects on a painful conversation about Sasa's controversial television persona and her supposed lack of proper training. Rio remembers bowing to a furious executive and desperately promising to be much more careful about Sasa's blunt, unfiltered on-air comments in the future. She even forced a highly reluctant Sasa to bow and apologize along with her, though the young idol grumbled that she was only following Rio's original advice to speak her mind. Back in the present, Rio laments the sheer exhaustion of always having to apologize on behalf of someone else, right, when a cheerful Narita returns to her table with the correct strawberry parfait. He quietly whispers that he got the kitchen to load up her dessert with extra strawberries and ice cream as an apology, though he silently realizes he was in such a rush to fix things that he forgot to take the incorrect matcha parfait away. To make things even better, Narita generously offers to let her keep the extra matcha dessert completely free of charge, leaving Rio absolutely thrilled by the unexpected double dessert treat. Narita is relieved to see she is such a sweet, appreciative customer, as Rio happily digs into both treats and declares them absolutely delicious, bringing a rare moment of positivity to his exhausting workday. The customer praises Narita, calling him an absolute master of customer service and comparing his skills to a world-class standard. Narita is flattered and flustered by the high praise, especially when she mentions she was feeling down before she got her parfait. She explains that his excellent service helped her forget about her bad mood. After thanking her, Narita politely passes her a napkin and quietly mentions that she has something on her mouth, prompting a confused customer to check her reflection. She gasps upon seeing the smudge on her face, quickly wiping it away in embarrassment, as she wonders how long she has been babbling away with a messy mouth. She thanks Narita for the heads-up, admitting she would have walked out of the restaurant looking ridiculous otherwise. Narita professionally replies that he is just glad to be of help, which makes her admire his formal customer service skills. She invites Narita to take a seat and join her, but Narita politely declines by explaining that he is still in the middle of his shift. She chuckles in understanding, realizing her request was a bit unreasonable. Since the restaurant is empty, Narita glances around and realizes there are actually no other customers to attend to, leading him to think that maybe he can stay and chat for just a little bit. Narita is amused by how quickly she gets into a casual mood. She suddenly decides to order a drink to keep the conversation going, completely catching Narita off guard. Narita questions if she really wants to have a drink right alongside her parfait, but she asks if that is actually weird. He tries to play it cool and says he guesses it is fine, even though he internally thinks the combination is absolutely bizarre. Narita serves her the drink, and she eagerly downs it, letting out a satisfied sigh of relief as she enjoys her refreshment. She admits that it is actually her very first time having a drink at a family restaurant, concluding that the experience is surprisingly great. Narita warmly thanks her for the compliment as they continue their relaxed conversation. The blonde customer casually reveals she is actually a regular at the family restaurant and asks if he always works these late weekday hours. When Narita admits he is stuck covering empty shifts, she instantly calls out his schedule for being completely abusive. Taking a bite of her dessert, she openly admires how hard he is working, though a humble Narita quickly brushes off the praise by claiming he is not doing anything special. She starts venting about how constantly cleaning up after her incompetent subordinates really sours her attitude, prompting Narita to awkwardly admit that he just quietly endures the exact same kind of misery. Continuing her rant, she confesses that she actively tries to hold back from being too harsh, because she genuinely hates the idea of her coworkers secretly disliking her. Looking totally drained, she complains that all those tiny little stressors constantly pile up until they wreck her skin and give her stress ulcers, mourning the carefree, stress-free days of her youth. Narita politely interrupts her depressing monologue to awkwardly remind her that she is currently venting in a bright family restaurant, and not a moody, dimly lit bar. He awkwardly offers his sympathies for her rough situation, and she lets out a heavy, exhausted sigh while admitting she is just completely fed up with everything. She concludes that all this pent-up frustration is exactly why she constantly ends up craving late-night sweets, using the sugary treat as her ultimate coping mechanism. Her gloomy mood instantly vanishes the second the dessert hits her tongue, leaving her happily blushing over how absolutely delicious it is. Without any warning, she casually holds out a spoonful of her dessert toward Narita, leaving the exhausted waiter completely confused by the sudden offer. The woman suddenly gets incredibly defensive and blushes loudly, accusing Narita of secretly judging her for acting way too cute for a 29-year-old grown adult. Narita frantically denies thinking anything of the sort, instantly diffusing the tension by casually revealing that they are actually the exact same age. The unexpected revelation completely shocks her, and she loudly marvels at the crazy coincidence with sheer excitement. Narita warmly admits that sharing the same exact age instantly makes him feel a little closer to her, earning a bright, genuine smile of agreement from his customer. Having thoroughly enjoyed her meal, she heads up to the front counter where Narita politely rings her up and thanks her for her patronage. While he finishes the transaction, she casually probes for his schedule, smoothly asking if he works any other shifts around this time of night. Narita readily his exact Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday schedule, which she notes with obvious interest as he hands over the receipt. She politely apologizes for distracting him from his shift, just to chat, but Narita easily brushes off the concern, assuring her that he had plenty of free time anyway. As they wrap up the conversation, Narita sweetly advises her to be extra careful on her way home since it is getting incredibly late, and she had been drinking. Totally charmed by his concern, she flashes him a playful wink and casually promises to see him again before heading out the door. Riding in the back of her taxi, the manager goes over the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday schedule in her head, firmly deciding that she will definitely have to drop by again. Meanwhile, back at the laundromat, Sasa sits completely alone as the heavy washing machines clunk away, quietly noting to herself that Narita clearly is not going to show up tonight. Staring blankly at her phone, she tries to play it totally cool, mentally convincing herself that his sudden absence does not actually bother her in the slightest. Chapter 6 kicks off with Narita finally returning to his chores, sliding open the glass doors of the rundown laundromat, completely unaware of the bizarre special guest waiting inside. While he casually scrunches up his empty laundry bag, a strange, creeping noise suddenly catches his attention, prompting him to glance over right, as something entirely unexpected peeks out from the corner. He leaps back in absolute shock and yells out in pure confusion as he suddenly finds himself face to face with a massive tortoise, just casually chilling by the machines. Staring down at the giant reptile slowly dragging itself across the room, an utterly baffled Narita questions out loud why a literal turtle is hanging out inside the building. Watching the creature slowly wriggle its way across the dirty floor, he briefly jokes to himself that maybe it just stopped by to do a load of wash before instantly shutting down his own ridiculous logic. Staring down at a massive tortoise casually walking across the laundromat floor, Narita realizes there is absolutely no way it is a stray, and deduces that the exotic reptile must have somehow escaped from someone's home. As the giant tortoise slowly crawls over and starts scratching against the wall, Narita finds himself completely transfixed by the quiet, slow-moving creature, and admits he cannot seem to take his eyes off of it. Right as Sasa gets a demanding text from her manager about a brutal 7 o'clock pickup time, the next morning the laundromat door rattles open, and she steps inside completely glued to her screen. Heavily sighing about her desperate need for a day off, Sasa finally looks up from her screen, immediately noticing Narita, and noting that it has been a hot minute since they last crossed paths, which he politely acknowledges with a warm hello. As Sasa gets her laundry ready, Narita casually teases her about her long absence, admitting he was starting to think she had finally given up on the laundromat and bought herself a brand new washing machine at home. Narita thoughtfully admits that once he got used to the routine, he actually started appreciating his quiet time at the coin laundry, a sentiment Sasa warmly understands as she begins sorting through her bags. Agreeing that having quiet moments to absolutely do nothing is incredibly valuable, Sasa suddenly freezes mid-sentence as she spots something highly unexpected on the floor right beside her. Sasa completely loses her mind in a massive panic and screams that there is a giant turtle in the room while a thoroughly amused Narita sits back and calmly confirms its presence with absolute chill. When Sasa scolds him for having such an underwhelming reaction to a literal exotic reptile, Narita defends himself by pointing out he already got his panic out of the way, leading Sasa to deeply wonder how on earth the creature even got inside in the first place. Narita points out that the tortoise likely just wandered in through the gap in the entrance, prompting Sasa to look over at the faulty sliding door as it creaks open, showing that it does not close all the way. Sasa completely rejects Narita's weak reasoning, crying out that his logic explains absolutely nothing. She points out that finding a stray cat wandering around would make total sense, but a random turtle showing up out of nowhere just defies all logic. The two of them fall completely silent, blankly staring down at the little reptile as it casually crawls across the laundromat floor. Breaking the silence, Sasa casually remarks that it feels like it has been an absolute eternity since she last saw a turtle, a sentiment Narita wholeheartedly agrees with. Narita casually identifies the reptile as a Greek tortoise, surprising Sasa that he actually knows the exact species. When he explains he just saw them at the zoo, and she asks if he is some kind of animal expert, he immediately brushes it off, claiming he only knows totally basic facts. Sasa wonders if the little guy managed to pull off a massive prison break from the local zoo, but Narita quickly shoots down the theory, explaining that since this species stays pretty small, it is way more likely to be an escaped pet, or a runaway from a nearby pet shop. Unconvinced by his modesty, Sasa firmly points out that he actually does know a surprisingly solid amount of trivia, forcing a flustered Narita to laugh and insist that his random knowledge barely even counts as anything special. Pulling out her phone to do some quick research, Sasa skims through an article about the tortoise's natural desert habitat and mating habits, quietly noting the specific detail that they primarily survive on a simple diet of grass and plants. Armed with her newly acquired internet facts, Sasa immediately cops a wildly smug attitude and proudly announces to Narita that their little visitor is actually an herbivore, acting like she just knew it all along. Narita easily agrees with her and effortlessly adds another crucial survival fact about the dangers of letting pet tortoises hibernate, completely ruining her smug moment and leaving her grumbling in annoyance over how much he genuinely knows. Defeated, Sasa bluntly concludes that he must just be a massive turtle fanatic, though Narita quickly laughs off the label and insists he really would not go quite that far. Sasa explains that she found watching a tortoise at the zoo so incredibly soothing that she actually stood there and read its entire informational plaque just because it was so cute. Watching the little reptile lazily crawl around completely melts her stress away, making her admit that its relaxed vibe makes her feel totally silly for ever getting so worked up earlier. Narita thoughtfully agrees that the calming aura is exactly what makes turtles so appealing, prompting Sasa to secretly conclude that he is a massive turtle fan before bluntly calling him a weirdo. The little tortoise just continues to mind its own business, completely oblivious to their ongoing conversation, as it slowly plods along the ground. The two of them sit side by side in comfortable silence, fully captivated by the tiny reptile as it quietly wriggles its way across the laundromat floor. Breaking the quiet atmosphere, Sasa asks if he is generally an animal lover, and Narita thoughtfully rubs his chin, before admitting that he probably leans more toward liking them than not. Sasa immediately calls out his incredibly detached answer, prompting Narita to explain that since he does not actually know much about animals, he cannot confidently claim to be a hardcore, dedicated fan. Sasa simplifies his overly logical stance by guessing he just has a casual appreciation for them, which Narita happily confirms is exactly right. The topic of casual fans strikes a deeply personal chord, with Sasa leading her to vent about toxic veteran fans constantly gatekeeping on social media, when she genuinely just appreciates any newcomer who cheers her on. Fixing him with an intensely serious look, she firmly insists that he never has to downplay his interests, just to appease others, boldly declaring that absolutely nobody else gets to dictate how much he is allowed to like something. Narita bluntly declares that he absolutely loves them, causing Sasa's heart to skip a beat, as she completely freezes in startled confusion. Narita sheepishly admits that stating his love so bluntly might ruffle some feathers, leaving a flustered Sasa to nervously agree, while a tiny turtle casually crawls across the floor in front of them. The loud, rhythmic thumping of the washing machines continues to echo through the quiet laundromat as the cycles spin. As the two continue their quiet conversation, the little turtle slowly wriggles its way out of the open door and begins crawling down the dark street. Sasa suddenly realizes something is missing, prompting Narita to point out that the little turtle has completely vanished. Narita marvels at how fast the reptile moved, noting that it was literally right there beside them just a second ago. Narita assumes that the creature simply made its quiet escape, without either of them noticing, though Sasa seems slightly unsettled by the sudden disappearance. Clearing her throat, Sasa cryptically asks if they are even completely sure that what they just saw was a real turtle, leaving a thoroughly confused Narita to ask what on earth she means. Sasa puts on a creepy expression and spooky voice, claiming that the mysterious escapee was probably just the ghost of a turtle. Her spooky theory is instantly ruined when Narita slides the door open and points out that the turtle is literally just casually strolling around right outside, leaving Sasa looking incredibly silly. Completely flushed and shaking with embarrassment, Sasa loudly demands that he just forget whatever she said, completely ignoring Narita, as he stands by the door in total confusion, asking what she was just muttering about the turtle. While Narita thoughtfully wonders if it is actually safe to just leave the stray reptile outside, since its owner is probably searching for it, Sasa awkwardly tries to change the subject, completely seething and internally agonizing over her absolutely humiliating blunder. Scrolling through his phone, Narita agrees that it is a tricky situation and wonders who they should even call about a lost pet, before suddenly stumbling across a post from the apparent owner, quickly deciding to reach out and get the whole mess sorted. Fast forward a bit, a smiling Narita holds onto the wildly flailing turtle, before successfully reuniting the runaway pet with a very polite, bowing neighborhood kid right at the laundromat entrance. Settling back onto the bench, Sasa expresses her relief that the little guy made it home safe, and Narita warmly agrees, pointing out that someone malicious could have easily snatched it up and sold it for a quick buck. Refusing to just let her earlier embarrassment go, Sasa tries to flip the script by noting how genuinely surprised she was to find out he believes in ghosts, prompting a highly defensive Narita to demand she stop circling back and fixating on such weird, random details. Trying to playfully smooth things over, Narita gives a reassuring smile and suggests that ghost turtles probably do exist out there somewhere. But Sasa immediately shoots down his awkward attempt at comfort and tells him he really does not need to try so hard to make her feel better. Realizing he is absolutely just messing with her at this point, Sasa glares daggers at the laughing waiter and internally seethes, silently vowing to make him pay for his teasing the next time they cross paths. While riding in the back of a car with her manager, Sasa checks the online reactions to her official announcement and spots a hateful comment telling her to disappear. The nasty jab immediately gets under her skin, causing her to grumble in frustration about the hater trying to pick a fight with her. Her manager quickly notices her irritation and tells her to just leave it alone. She stresses that the online negativity is endless and urges Sasa to ignore it, even though she completely understands why the comment made her so mad. Sasa reluctantly agrees to drop the issue, but her unresolved frustration leaves her needing a quiet place to escape and clear her head. To find her peace of mind, she heads straight back to her usual coin laundromat. Sasa rattles the laundromat door open, stepping inside with a surprisingly menacing aura that immediately puts Narita on edge. As she stalks toward him, he awkwardly tries to offer a polite greeting, internally wondering if her intense vibe is a silent signal demanding that he ask her what is wrong. Instead of returning his greeting, Sasa immediately starts muttering to herself as she unpacks her bag, grumbling that she was only trying to talk to her actual fans and not the haters. Narita just sits there completely bewildered, realizing he has walked right into another one of her emotional storms. Sasa continues her furious rant, calling the anonymous poster a pathetic coward who cannot even reply directly. Narita sweat drops and sighs to himself, realizing she is so incredibly deep in her own head that she did not even register his voice. Sasa suddenly turns around and plops down heavily onto the bench right next to Narita, ignoring his awkward attempt to say hello as she stews in her own anger. Narita tentatively points out that things seem pretty rough for her today, which Sasa quietly acknowledges. Sensing the incredibly tense atmosphere, Narita mentally decides it is probably best to skip the small talk tonight and just head straight home before he gets dragged any deeper. The heavy clunking of the washing machines fills the quiet space as Sasa sits in deadpan silence, slowly letting the steady hum of the laundromat soothe her lingering frustration. Suddenly breaking the heavy silence, Sasa turns her head and calls out to him, completely catching an already nervous Narita off guard. Looking incredibly serious, Sasa suddenly asks Narita if he would mind if she made a rather weird request, catching him completely off guard and leaving him hesitantly asking what she wants. She explains that she has a massive wave of annoying online haters, constantly trying to slander her, which Narita instantly realizes totally tracks when he recalls the brutal comment sections he has seen before. Sasa laments that she is strictly forbidden from ever responding to the constant insults, keeping her completely silenced even when she desperately wants to fire back. She drops her bizarre request by begging Narita to pretend to be one of her internet haters and ruthlessly trash-talk her, prompting Narita to bluntly point out that it is indeed an incredibly weird favor to ask. Sasa confidently counters that her plan is to take those fake insults and absolutely tear them to shreds using cold, hard logic. Narita finally deduces that she simply needs a safe way to blow off some steam, and since he has some extra time to kill, he casually agrees to play along with her bizarre coping mechanism. Sasa smugly warns him that she will not hold back, even if he ends up crying, but Narita just laughs it off, confidently assuring her that he is definitely not some fragile elementary school kid. Getting ready to launch into their weird roleplay session, Narita agrees to kick things off and prepare his very first mock insult. Channeling his inner online troll, Narita dramatically accuses her of being forced all over television and media, lately hyped up like she is some kind of major big-shot idol. He ruthlessly doubles down on the criticism, declaring that the only reason her music even sells is because her greedy agency forces her down everyone's throats, leaving a highly startled Sasa totally frozen by the sudden severity of his mock insult. Sasa aggressively fires back, defensively screaming that nobody is forcing anything on her, and clarifying that she never even called herself a songstress in the first place, before loudly labeling him an absolute idiot. Narita jokingly doubles down on the roast, teasingly suggesting her agency probably just bought all her fancy awards with cold, hard cash. The accusation pushes Sasa completely over the edge, causing her to explosively challenge him to attend one of her live shows so he can see her genuine talent for himself. Narita suddenly panics and gently asks if she is actually crying and wants to call it quits, but a sniffling Sasa stubbornly brushes it off and flatly orders him to keep the insults coming. Sasa admits that his insults are actually getting incredibly annoying because he is surprisingly good at roasting her. Narita proudly points out that he is just giving her a highly realistic hater experience, before Sasa announces she is taking the lead for the next round. Channeling her absolute best internet troll, persona, Sasa smugly hits him with a brutal insult, mocking him for having a completely pathetic life, and reminding him that social media is definitely not his personal therapist. Completely unfazed by her attack, Narita simply smirks and effortlessly counters by suggesting she just log off and quit social media altogether, completely wiping the smug confidence right off her face. Sasa instantly breaks character and aggressively screams that she literally has to use the platform for her job, prompting Narita to seamlessly slip right back into his hater persona and brutally call her a loser with way too much free time for telling him to get off her page. Narita keeps the troll act going flawlessly, sarcastically apologizing to the personal time police and lecturing her about understanding the downsides of being online. Sasa completely loses her cool, furiously seething at his highly accurate and infuriating troll logic. Suddenly struck by a brilliant idea, Sasa flips the entire script and flashes a highly confident grin, boldly accusing her dedicated hater of actually harboring a massive secret crush on her all along. Her totally unexpected counterattack leaves Narita completely stunned and speechless, while Sasa revels in triumph, as she realizes she finally found the ultimate comeback to completely shut down his relentless trolling. Sasa gets completely flustered, trying to explain herself, stuttering and struggling to find the right words to clarify what she actually meant. She frantically tries to clarify that she does not mean anything romantic by her previous comments, but Narita calmly cuts her off by assuring her that he already completely understands her point. Sasa quietly slides over on the bench closer to him, keeping quiet, while Narita simply nods along in understanding. Narita casually points out that internet haters might actually behave in that exact bizarre way. Sasa wonders if haters are really just deeply closeted fans in disguise, leading Narita to dryly question who would ever actually want that kind of toxic support. Finding comfort in his blunt logic, Sasa lets out a soft laugh and readily agrees with his take. Sasa pulls out her phone to reply to a nasty online comment, admitting that while she cannot exactly lash out, she finally feels like she knows how to handle toxic people thanks to his advice. Narita smiles and genuinely expresses his relief that he was able to help her feel a bit better. Narita watches her type and suddenly grows worried, remembering she previously mentioned she was not allowed to reply directly and wondering if her sudden post is going to cause trouble. The scene abruptly cuts to Sasa's official waiting room, where someone suddenly screams in absolute shock and horror over whatever Sasa just posted online. Sasa's manager is absolutely furious, yelling at Sasa about her actions from the previous night, and pointing out that her controversial social media response has officially gone completely viral. Meanwhile, Sasa sits there completely unfazed, calmly slurping her drink. Sasa casually defends her actions, explaining that she was only talking back to a hater. Her manager immediately fires back that her direct response is exactly the problem, reminding Sasa that she explicitly told her to stay completely silent and not engage. Sasa takes a quick glance at her phone, only to be met with a massive wave of negative comments from users mocking her, calling her personality terrible, and predicting she will delete the post. Staring at the mocking comments, Sasa's anger completely boils over as she gets incredibly irritated by the endless online mockery. Sasa tosses her phone onto the couch in pure frustration, groaning that no matter what she says, it only ever fans the flames. Drooping in absolute defeat, she concludes that the world simply sucks. Her manager mockingly tells her to save the tears, pointing out that she is actually the one who feels like crying since she is the one who has to clean up the massive public relations mess. The viral post itself is revealed, showing that Sasa bluntly replied to the haters' demand to disappear by telling them that they are the one who needs to disappear and should go delete themselves. Over the next few days, the drama completely blows up across all online news and social media, making Sasa the internet's favorite target once again. Meanwhile, Narita checks his phone during his break and sighs heavily over her latest public relations disaster. As Chapter 8 kicks off, a new evening begins with Narita sitting quietly at his office desk, tackling some back-end computer work, right as the clock strikes 6. He lets out a heavy groan of pure exhaustion, deeply stressing himself out as he agonizes over trying to put together the grueling staff schedule for the upcoming month. Staring blankly at the massive blocky spreadsheet filling his monitor, he mutters about how incredibly tough the task is, totally oblivious to his coworker sneaking up right behind his chair. Remy cheerfully peeks into the room to tell him good work, quickly scolding him for always working way too much, and urging him to finally go home, which an exhausted Narita awkwardly laughs off while appreciating her concern. Declaring that she is officially clocking out first, Remy happily waves goodbye, and Narita politely returns the farewell as she makes her exit for the night. Instead of heading straight home, Remy makes her way over to a local karaoke joint, smoothly pushing open the door to kick off her evening plans. She steps right into a massive, rowdy mixer packed with chattering friends and college students who are already loudly raising their glasses to toast the night away. While settling into the lively atmosphere, Remy is instantly put on the spot when a guy at the table smoothly leans in and asks if she currently has a boyfriend. Remy politely shuts down the probe by clarifying she is completely single right now, prompting the guy to immediately pivot his strategy by bringing up the anime she has been totally obsessed with and dropping the news about its upcoming movie adaptation. Remy eagerly confirms she already saw the big announcement, giving the guy the absolute perfect opening to claim he watched the series too, and smoothly ask her out on a date to go see it together. Remy politely agrees to hang out with a guy if their schedules happen to align, but the guy's friend thinks to himself that although he seems like a nice guy, something about their dynamic just is not clicking. The guy eagerly pulls out his phone to ask when they should go, but Remy quickly tries to push it off by explaining that she has been incredibly busy lately. Remy internally admits that the guy is not boring and they actually have a lot in common, but she still cannot figure out why she feels so disconnected. She barely tunes in as he praises her for working so hard at her part-time job. As the group of friends stands outside, one of them turns to Remy and asks where they should head next for the night. Remy quietly wonders what to do, only to suddenly freeze when she notices Narita quickly riding past on his bicycle. Without wasting a single second, Remy abruptly announces to her group that she is actually going to head straight home, waving her friends goodbye as she runs off to follow him. Remy hurries down the street, keeping her eyes peeled as she quickly walks through the neighborhood to catch up with Narita. She finally spots Narita at a nearby crossing, noting that he seems to have stopped his bicycle because a tall foreigner is asking him for directions. Quietly sneaking behind a corner, Remy watches them both pull out their phones to navigate, nervously wondering if Narita will actually be all right handling the language barrier. Her worries are quickly put to rest when Narita cheerfully tells the traveler that he will gladly take him to his destination, leaving the excited foreigner eager to head off with his helpful guide. Satonaka's heart completely melts as she spots Narita helping out a lost foreign traveler, instantly labeling her wholesome coworker as an incredibly nice guy for going out of his way to escort the stranger. Utterly charmed by his sudden act of random kindness, Satonaka cannot resist the urge to sneakily trail behind them to see how his wholesome rescue mission turns out. The lost traveler reaches his destination safely and offers a warm thank you, which Narita accepts with a humble, happy smile as he bids the visitor a friendly farewell. Just as Narita finishes his good deed, Satonaka suddenly pops out of nowhere and calls his name, giving the poor guy an absolute heart attack as he jolts back in sheer panic. When a startled Narita demands to know what she is doing in this part of town, Satonaka casually claims she was just taking a little detour before smugly admitting she saw his entire heroic escort. Narita immediately groans in complete embarrassment, laughing off how incredibly awkward he must have looked trying to guide someone when he can barely even speak a word of English. With the good deed officially wrapped up, the two co-workers decide to head home together, walking side by side down the busy evening street. As they stroll along, Satonaka keeps the mood incredibly bright and cheerful, happily chatting away, while Narita listens with a relaxed and genuine smile. Listening to his quiet responses, Satonaka finds herself reflecting on their friendship, realizing that she always feels completely safe and at ease whenever she is around Narita. Satonaka warmly asks how glad she is that the lost traveler managed to get to his destination safely, prompting a pleased Narita to happily nod along in complete agreement. Remy begins to her own personal perspective on the matter. She warmly reassures Narita that looking a little lame from time to time does not mean a person cannot still be cool. Though Narita is pleasantly surprised by her kind words, she quickly pivots the conversation by eagerly asking if he would like to grab a drink or two with her after their shift. The sudden invitation completely catches Narita off guard, leaving him questioning the timing of her offer. Remy instantly gets incredibly flustered, with her heart racing frantically, assuring him that she is completely fine with splitting the bill and letting him choose the spot. As she nervously awaits his answer in pure embarrassment, Narita can only offer a gentle, sympathetic response to her sudden panic. Narita begins to explain his schedule for the rest of the night, causing a hopeful Remy to wonder if they might still make it work. Unfortunately, Narita politely declines the offer due to his busy schedule, prompting a startled Remy to immediately worry if he already has a girlfriend. Narita quickly laughs off the girlfriend theory and assures her there is absolutely no chance of that, explaining that he simply has other commitments lined up for the night. Relieved but still a bit awkward, Remy accepts his explanation and notes that Narita always seems to keep a remarkably busy schedule. As they wrap up their shift, Narita's cheerful coworker bids him farewell, eagerly telling him to let her know the next time he has a day off so they can hang out. Narita happily promises that he will do exactly that before they head their separate ways. Standing outside the train station, Narita waves goodbye to his coworker as she heads up toward the platforms while he gets ready to ride his bicycle back home. Riding his bicycle back through the quiet streets, Narita cannot help but grin from ear to ear, absolutely thrilled by the fact that a coworker has actually invited him out for the very first time. Meanwhile, Sasa is already hanging out at the local coin laundromat, quietly sorting through her laundry as she prepares to start her regular washing cycle. The glass door rattles open as a cheerful Narita steps inside, warmly greeting Sasa with a polite good evening, which she casually acknowledges with a quiet hello. Noticing his unusually cheerful attitude, Sasa points out that he seems to be in an exceptionally good mood today, prompting a smiling Narita to reveal that the younger junior co-workers at his job just invited him out for drinks. While Narita continues to smile happily to himself, Sasa quietly stops what she is doing and fixes him with a highly observant, silent stare. Analyzing his unusually pleased expression, Sasa's mood instantly plummets as she darkens with suspicion, firmly concluding that the co-worker who invited him out was absolutely a woman. Utterly oblivious to her sudden change in attitude, Narita continues to gush about how incredibly happy he is to realize his junior co-workers do not actually hate him, while Sasa sarcastically replies with a completely deadpan congratulations. As Narita continues to chuckle happily to himself, Sasa finds herself stewing in a sudden wave of intense irritation, deeply annoyed by her own unexpected jealousy, and wondering why on earth his social life is bothering her so much. Narita explains that because it was tonight, he actually had to turn down a major invitation, leaving a highly surprised Sasa completely baffled by his sudden confession. Narita cheerfully reveals that his grand secret reason for turning down the invitation was simply because he had a massive mountain of piled-up laundry to take care of tonight. Sasa can only offer a flat, highly skeptical hum in response, completely unconvinced by his underwhelming explanation, as she blankly processes his incredibly mundane excuse. Sasa quietly grumbles that he did not absolutely have to do his laundry tonight of all nights, clearly annoyed by his questionable choice of priorities. She continues to mumble under her breath that if the invitation made him so incredibly happy, he really should have just gone out and enjoyed himself, leaving a completely clueless Narita in utter confusion. The scene shifts as a television broadcast begins, featuring Sasa in her element as she performs on screen during a music program. In a quiet household during dinner, a father points at the television screen and asks his daughter what the name of that popular singer girl she likes is again. The daughter casually confirms that the singer is indeed Sasa-chan, only for her dad to completely butcher the pronunciation of her name, leaving her completely speechless. Sasa can only let out an exasperated groan when her dad comments on her stage name, finding it to be an incredibly unusual choice. Her dad spots Sasa's idol persona on a video screen and innocently questions if she is supposed to be some sort of popular singer. Sasa completely gives him the cold shoulder, bluntly asking if there is even any point in trying to explain her career to him. Her dad can only offer an awkward chuckle, sadly agreeing that he probably wouldn't understand it anyway. Dinner at home is an incredibly quiet and awkward affair, with the mother urging them both to finish eating while Sasa and her dad exchange minimal words. Walking home alone under his umbrella in the pouring rain, the dejected dad laments that his home life is always this cold and depressing. He sighs that his work life is just as stressful, as he constantly worries about walking on eggshells and accidentally harassing his younger employees. He realizes that the only place he can actually relax is when he goes to clean the old laundromat that his grandmother left him. As he arrives at the building, he is surprised to notice that the lights are on and someone is already inside. Curiosity getting the better of him, the dad quietly sneaks up to the sliding glass door to peer inside and see who is visiting. Catching a glimpse of a familiar face through a doorway, Yahello completely freezes in his tracks as he realizes the girl standing right in front of him is actually the famous idol Sasa. He takes a second to doubt his own eyes, but after a quick double take and a fast check on his phone, he confirms with absolute certainty that she is the real deal. Thrilled by the idea of scoring an autograph to make his daughter's day, he almost rushes over before his common sense kicks in, hilariously predicting that an older guy aggressively approaching a young girl at night would instantly land him on a suspicious persons police report. Painfully self-aware of how creepy he might come across, Yahello awkwardly reins in his excitement and firmly decides to play it completely safe by just waiting for her to leave the area first. Retreating to a safe distance, he camps out inside a nearby convenience store, casually pretending to browse a magazine while keeping a watchful eye on the laundromat next door. Still completely baffled that a major celebrity is using such a mundane local spot, his quiet stakeout gets suddenly interrupted when he notices another guy casually strolling up to the building. Inside the quiet laundromat, Sasa is just minding her own business when Narita rattles the glass door open and casually drops a polite evening greeting. Sasa casually acknowledges his arrival, and Narita mentions the incoming rain before offering to let her borrow his umbrella for the walk home. Sasa stubbornly shakes off the generous offer by claiming she will be perfectly fine without it, prompting Narita to dryly remind her that staying dry is the entire basic purpose of an umbrella. She argues that taking his umbrella would just leave him stuck out in the rain instead. But Narita easily brushes off her concern, assuring her that he lives close enough to make the trip without any issue. Sasa spots Narita down the corridor while the owner of the laundromat observes them from behind, noting that the two of them seem to get along quite well. Narita shows Sasa his phone, warning her to look at the upcoming rain radar forecast heading their way. Sasa is shocked to see the entire radar map completely red, indicating a massive downpour. Meanwhile, the laundromat owner peeks inside and is completely stunned by how close they are sitting, muttering about how bold they are. The laundromat owner gets completely carried away in his own dramatic imagination, envisioning their sweet rose-filled youthful romance, as Sasa rests her head against Narita's chest. The owner nods sagely to himself as he finally pieces everything together, chuckling as he realizes his rundown coin laundry has officially transformed into a secret love nest for the young couple. Sasa waits inside as the door rattles open, immediately complaining that he is late. Narita apologetically explains that his meetings at work simply ran much later than expected. Sasa continues to pout about how long it has been since they last met, even though Narita insists he already apologized. He then smiles and suggests they his umbrella on the way back, since it looks like it is going to rain. Shifting into her shy, blushing state, Sasa softly agrees to his offer as they walk out into the pouring rain together under a single D umbrella. Watching them leave, the laundry owner smiles warmly and thinks to himself about the wonderful, fresh, romantic energy radiating from the young couple. As they walk, Sasa quietly glances over from her screen, thinking to herself about how umbrellas really have not changed one bit over the years. Sitting together in the quiet laundromat, Narita checks his phone and casually prompts Sasa to continue her thought. Sasa points out that umbrella designs literally have not changed since the Edo period, making her wonder if handheld umbrellas are just totally outdated now. Narita easily agrees that she actually has a pretty solid point. Narita guesses she is hoping for a completely hands-free umbrella for the next generation, which Sasa eagerly confirms, suggesting a revolutionary design that simply sits right on top of your head. Narita instantly pictures her ridiculous hands-free umbrella hat idea in his mind, leaving him staring at her with absolute deadpan silence, as he struggles to process how incredibly dumb it looks. Narita bluntly points out the fatal flaw that her goofy hat design would just leave her getting completely soaked from the sides. Sasa gets immediately defensive and challenges him to come up with a better idea. Taking up the challenge, Narita suggests those deep woven hats that tough historical characters always wear pulled down over their faces, leaving Sasa to quietly ponder his suggestion. Sasa gives a vague, dismissive agreement, making it painfully obvious to Narita that she has absolutely no clue what kind of historical hat he is actually talking about. Narita desperately tries to explain the long brim covering the face, but Sasa immediately shoots his idea down by reminding him they are supposed to be inventing something brand new, not literally going backwards in time. Sasa suddenly lights up with a brilliant idea and excitedly suggests a wearable umbrella. Narita awkwardly shuts her down again, casually reminding her that raincoats already exist, while secretly pitying her for thinking she finally cracked the code. The realization instantly hits Sasa, leaving her absolutely mortified, as her face erupts into a massive burning blush over completely forgetting that raincoats are already a thing. Narita cheerfully notes that anyone who gives it some thought would probably reach the exact same conclusion, though his easygoing attitude only seems to make Sasa steam with silent frustration right beside him. Desperate to prove her point, Sasa stammers that there are bound to be plenty of other incredibly convenient umbrellas out there that they simply do not know about, yet furiously scrolling through her phone, before aggressively shoving the screen right in front of him to show him the proof. Spying on them from the dark alleyway outside, Sasa's highly suspicious father misinterprets her showing her phone, as she reveals some kind of proof, instantly panicking that she has just discovered evidence of her companion cheating on her. Completely playing into her father's wild misunderstanding, Sasa dramatically demands to know how he could possibly explain what is on the screen, sending a highly startled Narita into a defensive panic, as he insists he has never even met that woman, and that it has to be a total mix-up. Sasa tearfully screams that he is a complete liar and absolutely the worst, which pushes her spying father right over the edge as he reels in pure shock and horror at the apparent betrayal. The devastated father mutters to himself about how having one beautiful woman apparently was not enough for him, totally oblivious to a nearby store employee staring at him in complete disgust and quietly branding him a total creep. The tense atmosphere lingers outside the quiet coin laundry as the dramatic misunderstanding continues to unfold. Sasa gathers her things and makes a swift exit, sliding the creaky door shut and leaving a bewildered Narita watching her walk out into the night. Once she is finally outside, Sasa walks down the quiet street while wiping away her frustrated tears, trying to compose herself after their intense and highly dramatic exchange. Watching her cry from the shadows, her horrified father concludes that they definitely had a massive fight over his cheating, furiously wondering how a guy with such a plain face could pull such a stunt, before resolving that his daughter needs to dump him immediately. Yahello gasps and desperately warns himself to wait and restrain his anger, tightly gripping his fist, as he tries to accept the painful reality that he is ultimately just a bystander in his daughter's complicated love life. Deciding it is best to simply forget about the entire dramatic ordeal, Yahello stands in the drizzling rain and tries to convince himself that absolutely nothing happened, and that no one was even there, right as Narita casually steps out of the laundromat to head home. Walking away under his umbrella, as the rain begins to pour down, Yahello firmly vows to himself that he will not tell a single soul about the devastating heartbreak he just witnessed. Meanwhile, walking through the heavy downpour, Sasa lets out a relaxed sigh of relief, silently thanking her lucky stars that she had the foresight to borrow Narita's umbrella before heading out into the storm. Under the dry shelter of her borrowed cover, she quietly reflects on her companion and sincerely hopes that he is doing all right out there in the massive storm. Unfortunately, Narita is not doing all right at all, as he finds himself completely drenched and frantically sprinting through the puddles, screaming in absolute despair over his freshly washed laundry, getting utterly ruined despite the brief break in the weather. Back at the family restaurant, Narita quietly works behind the register, his thoughts momentarily drifting as he focuses on his late-night shifts. Right nearby, Rimi's co-worker eagerly brings up Sasa-chan's latest major interview featured on a popular program, prompting an excited Rimi to declare that she will absolutely have to check that out later. Overhearing his co-workers discuss Sasa's latest activities, Narita quietly reflects on the news that she recently sat down for an official interview. Later that night, the familiar rhythmic thudding of the running washing machines once again fills the quiet space of the empty coin laundry. Sitting alone on the wooden bench, Narita pulls out his phone to pull up the video broadcast of her newly released interview, while his laundry spins in the background. The broadcast begins with a shot of the recording studio, quickly cutting to a highly focused Sasa calmly announcing that she is ready to begin. Setting the scene inside a major music studio in Tokyo, the segment highlights her professional demeanor as she prepares for the recording session. The narrator officially introduces her as Yoruzaki Sasa, explaining that she is widely recognized and described by her fans and peers alike as a highly charismatic figure in the industry. Watching the polished presentation on his phone, Narita quietly agrees with the narrator's high praise, noting that she definitely possesses that captivating aura. The interviewer asks Sasa about her personal philosophy for making her live performances feel truly special, right, as she casually takes a quick sip from her cup. True to her blunt and straightforward nature, Sasa flatly replies that she does not actually have a grand philosophy, asserting that as long as everyone is having fun, that should be more than enough. Staring at her honest response on the screen, Narita quietly smiles to himself, appreciating her simple yet authentic outlook on her career. The interview shifts to a home visit style segment as Sasa opens the door and enters her apartment, followed closely by the recording crew as they prepare to capture her living space. Narita silently notes that she lives in a surprisingly nice apartment, watching as the interviewer on screen compliments her on keeping her place so tidy, despite her chaotic schedule, which Sasa casually shrugs off. While Sasa relaxes, the interviewer asks her about her long-term plans for the future, catching her slightly off guard as she ponders the question. Sasa honestly admits that she has not really given much thought to her future plans, though she hesitatingly begins to search for a proper answer. Sasa explains that as long as she can survive simply by singing her songs, that is more than enough for her, prompting the show's narrator to praise her exceptional modesty, while Narita watches in quiet surprise. The broadcast highlights a lively performance clip with the narrator, noting that her genuine down-to-earth attitude is exactly why so many dedicated fans constantly flock to her live shows. Showcasing her powerful stage presence, the segment concludes with the narrator declaring that her artistic soul can be intensely felt through all 5 senses. As the interview video wraps up, Narita quietly gazes at his screen, processing her words and feeling a deeper appreciation for her genuine dedication. Right on cue, the sliding door of the coin laundry suddenly rattles open, and the real Sasa steps inside with her laundry bag, catching Narita's immediate attention. Narita politely offers her a warm greeting, and Sasa gives him a casual bow and a quiet hello as she prepares to get her laundry started. Narita casually mentions that he actually just finished watching her latest interview online, catching Sasa slightly off guard as she does her laundry. She offers a brief acknowledgement before Narita warmly compliments her television appearance, telling her she looked incredibly cool during the segment. Sasa skeptically questions his unexpected praise, prompting Narita to double down and call her highly charismatic, a compliment that leaves her quietly amused. Instantly getting completely full of herself, Sasa puts on a smug smile and dramatically brags that while showing off her authentic self is slightly embarrassing, it gives her fans a great peek behind the scenes. She immediately ruins the illusion by launching into a massive non-stop rant about how the interviewers asked way too many pointless questions, leading Narita to instantly retract his earlier praise in his head, as he realizes she actually has absolutely zero natural charisma. Trying to abruptly change the subject, Narita casually asks when the interview was actually filmed, prompting Sasa to take a seat and try to remember the exact timeline. Sasa casually estimates that the shoot probably happened about 6 months ago, which Narita notes is actually quite a long time to wait for an episode to finally air. Sasa groans about how her manager strictly ordered her to keep her room completely spotless for the entire duration of the shoot, prompting Narita to quietly note just how much authority her manager has over her. A flashback reveals her deeply stressed manager totally losing her mind over Sasa's unbelievably trashed apartment, brutally forcing the lazy idol to violently cram all her scattered junk straight into the closet, just to hide the massive mess from the cameras. Back in the present, Narita bluntly points out that her room is clearly always a total disaster, but a highly defensive Sasa stubbornly argues that since she only ever goes home to sleep, it is practically impossible to keep up with any daily cleaning. Sasa explains that she had originally planned on just leaving everything exactly the way it was, but she ultimately had no choice but to follow her manager's strict orders. A flashback reveals Rio aggressively shutting down the idea of showing off Sasa's messy living space, furiously declaring that they absolutely cannot broadcast such a disgusting room to the entire country. Entirely unfazed by the criticism, Sasa casually told Rio that if the mess bothered her so much, she should just clean it up herself, confidently asserting that she was perfectly fine living in the clutter. With Rio left with no real choice but to clean the room herself, Sasa smugly explains to Narita that the situation played out exactly along those lines. Narita remarks that her manager sounds like an incredibly kind person, which Sasa readily confirms by sharing how Rio constantly looks after her whenever she forgets her wallet, phone, or passport, prompting Narita to dryly point out that Rio sounds way more like a protective mother than a manager. The maternal comparison completely tickles Sasa, sending her into a sudden fit of giggles, as she happily agrees that Rio's overprotective behavior is indeed exactly like a mother's. Narita notes that her on-screen explanation of her live show philosophy felt uniquely characteristic of her, which she thoughtfully expands on, by explaining that she genuinely strives to make every performance a lifelong memory since she is the one up on stage. Narita playfully scolds her for delivering a much more profound answer to him than she did on television, though Sasa is completely oblivious to the difference, prompting him to pivot and ask what she actually wants to achieve in her future. Sasa instantly fires up with absolute determination, loudly declaring that her ultimate future goal is to force all of her online haters to apologize for all the trash they constantly talk about her. Amused by her incredibly rapid and highly aggressive response, Narita notes how vastly different this is from her televised modesty, leaving him to quietly wonder if the constant online negativity secretly gets to her far more than she ever lets on. Narita logically assumes that since her interview filming took so long, the camera crew must have eventually followed her straight to the laundromat. Sasa pauses, looking a little caught off guard by the deduction. Averting her eyes and sweating slightly, Sasa awkwardly mutters that they probably did show up, but she assumes the footage just got completely cut from the final broadcast. Narita simply accepts her vague answer. In a brief flashback, Sasa casually excuses herself in the middle of filming to do her laundry, leaving the completely bewildered camera crew to hurriedly gather their gear and trail right behind her into the building. Back in the present, Sasa stews in annoyance, firmly thinking to herself that even for a major television interview, she absolutely refuses to let strangers intrude on her peaceful laundromat time, frustrated that she explicitly marked the location as strictly off-limits to the crew. Shifting the mood, Sasa casually admits she is actually a little jealous that he gets to be featured on a show. Narita just nervously laughs it off, insisting that since he is merely a standard family restaurant employee, an interview about his job would be incredibly boring. Sasa flashes a warm, genuine smile and firmly insists that as long as someone is earnest and hardworking, literally any job can look incredibly cool, leaving Narita quietly staring at her in pleasant surprise. Deeply touched by her sincere compliment, Narita breaks into a gentle smile and softly admits that she is probably right. Getting back to his chores, Narita quietly rustles his empty laundry bag as he stands in front of the heavy washing machines. Out of nowhere, Narita casually offers Sasa a discount coupon for his restaurant chain, though he quickly backpedals, awkwardly assuming that a big-time idol like her probably never actually eats at cheap family diners. Sasa glances back over her shoulder with a sweet smile and instantly accepts the offer, happily assuring him that she would genuinely love to visit his restaurant since he is the one offering. Rummaging through his pockets, Narita pulls out a 25% off discount ticket and smoothly hands it over to a grateful Sasa. He casually explains that the restaurant staff receives a fresh batch of these coupons every single month, but he always ends up with way too many extras lying around anyway. Sasa marvels at the unexpected little perk, quietly inspecting the ticket as Narita gives a polite bow and bids her good night before heading out. Sometime later, a disguised Sasa wanders the city streets completely starving, lamenting that she worked so hard she accidentally crashed in bed and entirely skipped dinner. Desperate for a quick meal, she spots a nearby family restaurant called Cineraria and decides it will definitely do the trick for the night. Settling into her cozy booth to browse the menu, she suddenly remembers the discount ticket Narita recently gave her. Her thoughts are abruptly cut short when a male waiter approaches her table, making her sharply gasp as she briefly wonders if it might actually be Narita. Quickly shaking the hopeful thought away, she firmly reminds herself that she is only there to eat, casually glancing at the unfamiliar waiter and assuming Narita just works a different shift. After finishing her meal, Sasa heads up to the front register and smoothly hands over her discount ticket, only for the apologetic cashier to suddenly stop her. The cashier awkwardly points out that the coupon is actually meant for a completely different restaurant chain, leaving Sasa absolutely mortified and burning red as she frantically apologizes for the humiliating blunder. Realizing that Narita is not working his shift tonight, Sasa awkwardly stammers to the cashier that she will just pay for her bill using her mobile phone while nervously rummaging through her pockets. As Chapter 11 officially begins, Rio attends a wedding at a beautiful church, cheerfully offering her congratulations to her close friend, while secretly harboring a tiny bit of loneliness about the major milestone. The happy bride brightly thanks her for the sweet congratulations, while the crowd of guests continues to celebrate the beautiful ceremony around them. Surrounded by the joyous cheers of the other wedding guests, Rio quietly looks on, with a slightly pensive and wistful expression, feeling the quiet weight of her solitary life. Seeking solace after the emotional day, Rio heads straight to her usual family restaurant to drink some wine, completely slumping over her table in her melancholic mood, until the sudden clunk of a cup being set down catches her attention. Narita warmly welcomes her and pours her a fresh drink, which a deeply parched Rio immediately downs in one massive, desperate gulp. Absolutely amazed by the refreshing taste, Rio eagerly asks what kind of high-end alcohol he just served her, only for Narita to deadpan that it is literally just plain water, sending a deeply embarrassed Rio into a groaning, defensive panic, as she stammers that he does not need to be so overly considerate. Narita is left completely speechless by the fact that she cannot even distinguish alcohol from tap water, though a slightly blushing Rio quickly brushes it off by asserting that some incredibly rough days are simply just like that. Narita cheerfully informs his customer that the restaurant is officially closed and no more orders will be taken, as he collects her empty glass. From around the corner, a co-worker tells him to just head out while he finishes cleaning up the rest of the floor, which Narita gratefully accepts. Rio drunkenly vents about how absolutely everyone around her is getting married, loudly complaining that she is completely broke from buying so many wedding presents, and is genuinely starting to panic about her own future. Narita deeply sympathizes with her financial struggles, casually confirming his earlier suspicion that she had just come straight from a wedding. Getting incredibly emotional, a teary-eyed Rio starts spiraling into a deep depression, tragically wondering out loud if she is destined to just live her entire life and die completely alone. Narita immediately steps in to comfort the weeping manager, gently urging her to calm down and kindly reassuring her that everything is going to be absolutely fine. Still highly emotional, Rio bitterly recalls how back in her student days everyone constantly told her she would definitely be the very first one to get married. She laments that before she even realized it, she somehow ended up being the absolute last single person left in her entire friend group. Trying to cheer her up, Narita gently suggests that she is only single because she pours so much of her hard work and dedication into her career. Rio softly agrees, noting that when absolutely all you do is work, the years just effortlessly fly right by. Narita completely relates to her exhausted lifestyle, admitting that, on his rare days off, he barely even has the energy to climb out of bed. Rio completely agrees with his sentiment, letting out a heavy sigh, as she realizes that drinking alcohol is not actually a healthy distraction for her loneliness after all. Deciding she needs a fresh distraction, Narita casually takes a seat right across from her in the booth, and suggests they change the subject. He politely asks if her name is actually Rio, which she confirms as Kusaka Rio, before playfully asking for his name in return, prompting the waiter to finally introduce himself as Narita Rintaro. Instantly perking up, Rio flashes a bright smile and immediately bestows him with the goofy nickname Naririn, leaving Narita to just politely smile and softly repeat the silly new moniker. A sudden heavy silence falls over the booth as Rio drops her cheerful demeanor, turning her gaze completely serious as she intensely stares him down from across the table. Resting in her booth, Rio casually asks Narita if he currently has a girlfriend, and he readily laughs off the question by assuring her he is completely single, before turning the question back around to confirm she is in the exact same boat. Narita sheepishly admits that while he certainly does not plan on staying single forever, finding the time and energy has simply been incredibly tough lately. His honest confession strikes a deep chord with Rio, who quietly reflects on the fact that he actually has her same desire to eventually get married. Narita politely steps up to ask if she is ready to settle her bill, prompting a distracted Rio to quickly snap out of her thoughts and hand over her card to pay. Clinging to her phone, Rio finds herself suddenly seized by a desperate urge to ask him for his contact number before she leaves the restaurant. Her courage immediately falters as she pauses, starting to overthink the situation and anxiously wondering if making such a personal request would actually make her a massive nuisance to him. Rio spirals into a full-blown mental panic, worrying that he might block her immediately or ban her from the restaurant entirely, especially since she has basically been using the quiet family restaurant as a cheap bar to get drunk after closing hours. While Rio silently loses her absolute mind and clutches her head in utter frustration in her booth, Narita watches her bizarre behavior from the cash register, deeply sweating as he wonders if she is going to be all right in more ways than one. Desperately needing a moment to compose herself, Rio retreats to the restroom, letting out a massive sigh of relief as she tries to wash away her intense embarrassment. Meanwhile, back at her apartment, Sasa is relaxing on her couch after her shower when her phone suddenly begins vibrating violently on the cushion, catching her completely off guard as she prepares to answer. Sasa picks up her vibrating phone late at night, realizing it is her manager, Rio, calling. Answering with a simple hello, Sasa instantly deduces from the late hour that Rio is probably completely drunk. Rio asks if she has a minute to talk, and when Sasa asks what is going on, a teary-eyed and loudly sobbing Rio desperately demands to know how someone is supposed to ask for a guy's contact info. Sitting comfortably on her couch, Sasa deadpans while listening to Rio whining loudly through the receiver, begging for advice on how to get a guy's number without coming across as incredibly suspicious. Completely lost on the romantic nuances, Sasa bluntly suggests simply exchanging business cards. A flustered Rio immediately shoots the idea down by pointing out that the guy might not even have one to give back. Casually squeezing a small massage roller in her hand, Sasa effortlessly pivots and tells Rio to just hand over her own business card by itself, assuring her that there is absolutely nothing suspicious about a professional giving out their contact info. Rio's eyes widen in sheer realization as she loudly praises Sasa for being an absolute genius. Having successfully solved the crisis, Sasa simply bids her a blunt goodnight and immediately hangs up the phone. Feeling completely reinvigorated, Rio marches confidently back toward her booth, thrilled by the realization that he can just contact her on his own terms. She plans to casually slide him the card while apologizing for all her drunken rambling, happily rummaging through her purse to secure it. Her confidence instantly shatters when she discovers her card holder is completely empty. A horrifying memory of an earlier meeting flashes in her mind, causing her to slump face first onto the table with a heavy sigh as a massive headache suddenly kicks in. Wide-eyed and absolutely horrified, she remembers that she completely ran out of business cards during that exact meeting. Looking entirely dead inside, she stares blankly ahead and whispers that she is just so incredibly done with life. Narita cheerfully walks back over to the booth to return the discount card she accidentally left behind, only to loudly panic in sheer shock when he finds the manager completely passed out and snoring on the table. Narita tries to shake her awake, but Rio is completely passed out and unresponsive, leaving him to sigh in defeat and realize he has no way of carrying her home entirely on his own. Doing his best to assist her, Narita carefully helps the completely out-of-it Rio onto the back seat of a taxi parked right outside the restaurant. The taxi driver turns around with a worried look and asks if the heavily sleeping woman is actually going to be all right. Narita sheepishly explains that she simply had a little bit too much to drink at the family restaurant, prompting a highly skeptical driver to silently think that the entire situation is incredibly strange. Narita gently pats her shoulder and asks where she lives so the taxi can take her home, allowing a slurring Rio to sleepily mutter that she lives near the convenience store on the main street of Dawanzaka-cho. Once the driver confirms he knows the exact location, Narita generously hands over a large bill to cover the entire fare in advance. Narita stands on the quiet street and watches the taxi drive away into the night, silently hoping that his regular customer manages to make it home safely. Inside the moving car, Rio slowly blinks her eyes open and looks around in complete confusion, suddenly realizing she is in the back of a taxi and desperately trying to piece together what on earth just happened. As memory of her embarrassing behavior at the restaurant comes rushing back, Rio lets out a massive groan of absolute regret over her huge screw-up right as the taxi radio starts playing Sasa's brand new song. Rio sits in quiet contemplation as the melancholic lyrics about the error of love and wanting to turn back the clock drift through the quiet car, matching her own pensive mood. Riding in the back of her taxi, a depressed Rio stares blankly out the window and desperately begs whatever higher power is listening to immediately patch the massive bugs ruining her romantic life, or at least send her a proper instruction manual if her miserable solo route is actually an intended feature. Staring gloomily at her reflection in the dark glass, she heavily regrets downing so much alcohol and bringing all this unnecessary emotional turmoil upon herself. Feeling the familiar sting of tears welling up in her eyes, Rio groans in absolute defeat as another heavy wave of drunken, sorrow begins completely taking her over. A brief flashback reveals that Rio was actually so incredibly embarrassed by her drunken meltdown that she later returned to the family restaurant, just to furiously bow an apology, and literally hand Narita an envelope stuffed with a 10,000 yen bill, leaving the exhausted waiter awkwardly chuckling over her extremely thorough apology gesture. Chapter 12 kicks off at a bright television studio, where a staff member loudly announces Sasa's official arrival as the idol calmly steps onto the music show set. With Rio trailing closely right behind her to manage the schedule, Sasa confidently makes her way across the busy studio floor past the heavy camera equipment. Approaching the production crew, Sasa and her manager politely bow to the staff and formally ask them to take good care of them for the upcoming shoot. A cheerful director enthusiastically pumps his fist and encourages Sasa to give it her absolute all for the broadcast, today prompting the deadpan idol to flatly promise that she will do her best. Rio firmly warns Sasa to try and wrap up her upcoming recording session without making any of her signature blunt or rude remarks, which the young idol casually brushes off with a simple agreement. Sitting on set for her recording, Sasa quietly reflects on the realization that almost everyone in her life seems to call her by a completely different name, pondering her fluid identity as the show continues around her. Later that evening, Sasa heads back to her usual coin laundromat, stepping inside to unpack her latest bag of laundry into one of the empty machines. The door suddenly rattles open as Narita walks in and offers a warm good evening, which Sasa casually returns as she gets her wash cycle started. As they both tend to their chores, Sasa quietly glances over at Narita as a sudden curious thought begins to form in her mind. Settling onto the wooden bench, Sasa suddenly realizes she has absolutely no idea what his name actually is, concluding that he likely has never even told her. Having finished loading his machine, Narita casually walks over and takes a seat on the bench right next to her, leaving her to stew in her sudden curiosity. Sasa hesitates, realizing it is incredibly embarrassing to ask for someone's name after hanging out for so long, though she is still too intensely curious to simply let the matter drop. She briefly imagines playing it cute by bubbly asking him if he would mind telling her his name again, since she might have forgotten it. However, Sasa immediately cringes at her own sweet fantasy, firmly deciding that acting that out of character is absolutely not happening. Breaking the quiet atmosphere, Sasa casually grabs Narita's attention and warns him that she is about to ask a pretty weird question. Slightly puzzled, Narita simply gives her the green light to proceed. Sasa gets straight to the point and randomly asks him what his assigned class seat number was back when he was a student. Narita recalls being assigned seat number 18 during his third year, internally agreeing that her question is incredibly bizarre, while Sasa repeats the number to herself. When Narita naturally asks what prompted such an oddly specific topic, Sasa quickly brushes off his curiosity and claims it was just a random passing thought. Narita thoughtfully ponders the exchange, while Sasa quietly mutters the seat number, clearly trying to calculate his alphabetical placement in her head. Sasa seamlessly follows up by volunteering her own initials, before casually asking for his, suddenly making Narita realize she is just awkwardly fishing for his real name because she refuses to ask him directly. Playing along, Narita reveals his initials, which instantly frustrates Sasa, as she complains that the starting letter barely narrows down his actual surname at all. Offering another hint, Narita teases that the first kanji of his name has exactly 6 strokes, leaving Sasa quietly analyzing the clue, before he bluntly calls her out for trying to deduce his identity. Completely caught off guard by his direct call-out, Sasa loudly gasps and frantically backpedals, desperately denying the accusation in a massive panic. While Sasa stubbornly tries to play it cool and continues decoding the 6-stroke hint, a wildly smug Narita easily reads right through her denial and teasingly asks if she genuinely wants to know the answer. Desperate to figure out his name, Sasa begs him for a clue, making a highly amused Narita realize that she is incredibly easy to read. Finally giving in, Narita tosses her a bone by revealing that his surname starts with the syllable na, prompting a thoughtful Sasa to repeat it as she begins her guessing game. Narita adds another clue by mentioning that his surname is a name with a specific location, leaving Sasa completely baffled and grumbling about how ridiculous the riddle is. To make things even more confusing, Narita drops another hint about an airplane, leaving Sasa entirely stumped as she tries to connect all the weird clues. As the washing machines loudly thunk and rumble in the quiet laundromat, Sasa sits in deep silence, intensely racking her brain to puzzle out the answer. Sasa finally speaks up with a wild guess of Nuttridge, forcing a highly defensive Narita to ask if he really looks like the kind of angry person who constantly complains like that. When Sasa complains about the difficulty, Narita casually points out that she could easily solve the riddle if she just searched the hints on her phone. Sasa stubbornly rejects the phone idea because she wants to get it right on her own and would feel defeated otherwise, while Narita reassures her that his surname is so ordinary she should easily be able to guess it. Deciding to take another shot, Sasa asks if his surname is Nekeyama, but Narita calmly shuts her down with a flat refusal. Refusing to give up, Sasa immediately pivots and guesses Nakazawa instead, only for Narita to sigh and tell her that she is wrong once again. Sasa suddenly has a breakthrough and confidently guesses Nakatomo as his name, but he immediately shoots down the idea by dryly asking if he actually looks like a professional football defender to her. Amused by her terrible guessing game, he casually asks if he should just spare her the effort and tell her his actual name already. Sasa immediately plays it cool and pretends she does not actually care either way, though he silently notes that she is completely incapable of just being honest. Deciding to end the game, he finally introduces himself to her as Narita Rintaro. Sasa repeats his name as the pieces finally click, realizing that his earlier hint about an airplane was a direct reference to the famous airport. Sasa tries to save face by praising his hints as being totally on point, but he laughingly counters that they could not have been that good since she managed to guess every single wrong answer first. Giggling to herself, Sasa repeats his name and playfully teases him about how incredibly ordinary it sounds. He easily rolls with the tease, asking what other kind of name she would possibly expect from an entirely ordinary guy. Feeling like it is only fair to return the favor, Sasa suggests that she should probably her own name with him as well. He asks if she is truly comfortable sharing her name, and she dismisses the concern, insisting it is fine just so they can finally be even. Sasa comfortably tells Narita that he simply does not seem like the gossiping type who would ever blab her secrets to other people. Remembering her legendary online clapbacks, Narita can only let out an awkward laugh in response. She logically explains that if he were actually the kind of person who wanted to brag about his celebrity encounters on social media, he definitely would have done it a long time ago. Sasa proudly points out that every single time he visits this run-down laundromat, he gets the exclusive privilege of chatting with none other than the popular idol Yoruzaki, Sasa herself. While Sasa completely basks in her own self-proclaimed charismatic aura, Narita casually admits that he really has not ever mentioned his late-night laundromat chats with a famous idol to anyone else. Sasa suddenly shifts the conversation and playfully challenges him, asking Narita what he honestly thinks her actual birth name is behind her famous stage name. Narita thoughtfully tries to decode her secret, asking if her real initials are simply the letters Y, S, and guessing that her actual name might just be a clever variation or reversal of her stage name. Realizing he is actually on the right track, Sasa suddenly pivots and asks if he is good at escape rooms, only for Narita to admit he has never tried them because he has no friends to go with a lonely reality Sasa immediately and quietly relates to. Narita quietly points out that, while he does not absolutely need to know her closely guarded secret, his curiosity has still been piqued just a tiny bit. Flipping the script, Narita flashes a playful smirk and casually lets her know that if she genuinely has a deep desire to her real name with him, he certainly would not mind listening. Sasa instantly roasts his smooth attempt at a comeback, teasingly declaring that making comments like that is exactly why he has absolutely no friends, leaving Narita to chuckle and readily agree with her brutal assessment. The scene transitions back to the familiar quiet of the local coin laundromat as a new conversation begins. Sitting together on their usual bench, Narita tries to guess Sasa's actual name, suggesting it might be something starting with the letter S like Sagawa. Sasa gleefully shoots down his attempt and buzzes him for being completely way off, happily preparing to finally reveal her real name. To keep it a complete secret, she leans in close and quietly whispers her actual name directly to him. Sasa confesses that saying her full name out loud feels incredibly embarrassing and a little strange, prompting Narita to casually remark that it sounds like an early prototype of her actual stage name. She chuckles softly at his reaction, playfully asking if he thinks her real name sounds totally ordinary. After weeks of late night, laundromat meetups, this comfortable night marks the official moment they finally each other's actual names. As a brand new chapter kicks off, Narita finds himself stuck working another relentless shift, struggling to power through the constant beeping of the register as he serves his next customer. The relentless beeping of call buttons and cash registers continues to ring in Narita's ears as his coworker asks him to clear another table, adding to his incredibly exhausting shift. Once his grueling workday finally ends, Narita seeks some much-needed refuge in the quiet laundromat, slumping onto the bench while the machines rumble in the background. Still completely haunted by the phantom beeping sounds from the restaurant, Narita silently wishes his workplace would just invest in a service robot, totally unaware of Sasa quietly peeking in from the doorway. Sasa politely greets him as she enters, but she quickly notices his zombie-like state and wonders if he is completely out of it tonight. She quietly sits down next to him on the bench, while her laundry spins, casting a concerned glance toward her unusually silent companion. When Sasa asks if he is feeling under the weather, Narita lets out a weary smile and admits that it has simply been one of those incredibly long and tiring days. Curious about what went wrong, Sasa leans in to ask if something specific happened to completely drain his energy. Narita quickly reassures her that it is nothing serious, explaining that he is just dealing with a massive pile of minor stressors at work. Sasa softly acknowledges his struggle as they both settle back into the comforting, rhythmic hum of the spinning dryers. To break the heavy atmosphere, Sasa rustles open a small bag of candy and pops a piece into her mouth, quietly munching away while silently watching his reaction. Sasa breaks the quiet by offering him a piece of her candy, asking if he would like one. Narita readily accepts her thoughtful offer, happily taking a piece of candy from her bag. The two of them sit together in comfortable silence under the flickering laundromat, lights quietly chewing on their sweets. Sasa casually asks a piece of advice she got from a friend about how eating sweets is the ultimate cure for fatigue, and Narita wholeheartedly agrees, as he enjoys the grape flavor. Hoping to cheer him up even further, she pulls out her phone and explains that watching funny online videos is her go-to coping mechanism whenever she is feeling down. Sasa eagerly slides her phone over to show him a clip of a cute puppy, hoping the adorable video will help put a smile on his face. However, Narita just continues to chew in total deadpan silence, with a completely blank expression, leaving a horrified Sasa sweating over his absolute lack of a reaction. The awkward silence completely panics Sasa, who immediately overthinks his lack of enthusiasm as a devastating blow to her personal taste. When Narita finally manages to politely call the video interesting, Sasa instantly calls out his blatant lie, mentally noting that he has been chewing on that single piece of candy for an impossibly long time. Dying of pure embarrassment, Sasa quickly slides away on the bench and desperately tries to shift the blame, frantically claiming that a friend sent her the clip, and it is definitely not the kind of video she usually watches. Realizing how hard Sasa is trying to handle the awkwardness just to make him feel better, Narita silently appreciates her sweet attempt to cheer him up. As Sasa laughs off her embarrassment, Narita gives her a warm, understanding smile that instantly breaks the lingering tension. Narita explains that a part-timer unexpectedly quit and left a massive gap in the restaurant's schedule, making his workday incredibly hectic and leaving Sasa wondering why the worker would even leave. Sasa passionately declares that acting ungrateful always invites terrible karma, firmly believing that bad actions will eventually catch up to people. She predicts that the runaway coworker is bound to face some serious bad luck for abandoning the restaurant in such a selfish way. Clenching her fist in encouragement, Sasa reassuringly tells Narita that since he is always so kind and helpful, something incredibly good is bound to happen to him in return. Narita warmly smiles at her sweet theory, but Sasa doubles down on his defense by arguing that whoever hired the irresponsible part-timer is the one truly at fault, insisting that Narita has absolutely nothing to blame himself for. Her supportive rant instantly grinds to a halt when Narita quietly reveals that he was actually the one who hired the guy, leaving Sasa completely frozen in absolute awkward silence. Seething in pure embarrassment over her accidental insult, Sasa curls up on the bench and groans out loud while a sheepish Narita can only offer a weak laugh to ease the tension. Narita looks down with genuine disappointment, explaining that the employee seemed incredibly earnest and like a great fit, expressing his heartfelt regret that the worker did not just talk to him so they could have solved any issues together. Narita sighs heavily, admitting that whatever his coworker was struggling with might not have been something the employee felt comfortable discussing with a fellow colleague. Sasa aggressively shakes her head in disagreement, firmly asserting that the coworker who walked out is overwhelmingly the only one in the wrong. Realizing his role in the hiring process, Sasa awkwardly stammers and asks if Narita is actually a manager or some kind of higher-up at the restaurant. Narita quickly laughs off her assumption, clarifying that he is actually just a simple low-level employee, though Sasa does not look entirely convinced by his modest answer. Pivoting back to their snacks, Sasa offers him another piece of candy, which Narita gladly accepts, while specifying he will only have one more. She also mentions she has a bag of chocolates with her, in case he prefers a different flavor instead. Narita politely declines the chocolate, holding up his single gummy, and explaining that his current piece is more than enough. Their quiet chat is suddenly interrupted when the washing machine lets out a series of loud beeps to signal the end of the cycle. Narita quickly gets up to empty his clothes, pulling open the machine door to gather his freshly washed laundry. With the machine finally emptied, the loud alarm cuts off, returning the cozy laundromat back to its comfortable, peaceful silence. As Narita steps away from the machines, he casually points out that Sasa seems to have completely forgotten to actually start her own laundry cycle. Apologizing for her silly oversight, Sasa politely asks if he would mind hitting the start button for her, since he is already standing right over there, which Narita casually handles. They both settle back into their usual spots as the loud rumble of the washing machines fills the coin laundromat once again. As Narita finishes closing up his machine with a thud, Sasa suddenly looks completely mortified as a highly distressing realization hits her. Right as Narita prepares to head out for the night, Sasa nervously calls out to get his attention before he can make his exit. She hesitantly asks him if he happened to catch a glimpse of what was currently spinning inside her washing machine. Narita looks back with a completely clueless expression, genuinely wondering what on earth he was supposed to have seen. Blushing heavily, Sasa immediately panics and waves her hands to shut down the topic, frantically telling him to just forget she even asked if he did not notice anything. Deciding it is finally time to end the night, Sasa gathers her things and announces she is heading out, which Narita politely acknowledges. As she exits into the night, Sasa groans in complete mental exhaustion over the chaotic and embarrassing flow of their late-night chat. Once she is outside, Sasa completely loses her mind in pure frustration, screaming, because she is absolutely convinced that her laundry was spinning right in front of Narita's face. She groans about the terrible timing, briefly wishing she had at least been washing something cuter, before instantly correcting herself for focusing on the completely wrong problem. Meanwhile, a smirking Narita chuckles to himself as he recalls the surprisingly unrefined style of her everyday clothing, finding the contrast to her glamorous, idle persona highly amusing. Unable to let the matter rest, Sasa suddenly stops in her tracks and turns back to confront him, refusing to let him walk away with any smug assumptions. She sprints right back down the street and calls out to him, completely catching a bewildered Narita off guard. Sasa loudly clarifies that those plain garments are strictly her backup clothes and definitely do not represent her main fashion lineup. Narita just stares at her in total confusion, asking if she is suddenly talking about baseball roster strategies or something similarly random. Sasa freezes in sheer disbelief, her mouth hanging open, as she realizes with absolute dread that he genuinely might not have noticed her laundry in the first place. Desperately trying to salvage the situation, Sasa screams that she is definitely not talking about baseball or undergarments, frantically telling him to just erase the entire conversation from his memory. With a loud slam of the door, she bolts back inside, leaving a thoroughly baffled and slightly sweating Narita standing completely alone in the quiet street. As Sasa completely loses her mind from embarrassment, back inside, Narita walks home wondering if his exhausted, spaced-out state somehow made him say something rude to her. Sometime later, Narita reflects on how the things a person wants most always seem to stay just out of reach as he slides open the door to the laundromat. Inside, Sasa is grumpily popping open a capsule toy, completely seething because she did not get the specific prize she wanted. As Chapter 14 officially begins their cozy late-night laundromat routine, continues with another comfortable meeting. Narita sweat drops in surprise when he notices a mountain of discarded capsule balls on the bench, realizing she went on an absolute buying spree. Sasa quietly greets him as he enters, prompting Narita to ask about the massive pile of toys she has accumulated. Sasa proudly displays a bird figurine, explaining she has gotten into collecting the series, though Narita is left completely baffled when she admits she does not actually like this sort of thing at all. Sasa explains that she originally bought one on a whim, but now she is deeply determined to collect the entire set since she has never managed to complete a full collection before. Narita looks over at the capsule toy machines in the laundromat, casually admitting that he has never actually had a proper collection of those miniature figures himself. Pondering how expensive the toys have gotten nowadays, Narita wonders just how many of them Sasa has already bought as he decides to try his luck at the machine. Sasa eagerly pops open another capsule, a wave of excitement washing over her, as she declares that cracking the container open is the absolute best part, while Narita warmly agrees. Her excitement instantly vanishes when she pulls yet another duplicate nutria, angrily complaining about her terrible luck, and tossing the unwanted figure over to Narita in sheer annoyance. Sasa laughs off her bad luck, noting that getting duplicates is just part of the game, which prompts Narita to ask if there is a specific animal she is hoping to find. Sasa confesses that she is desperately trying to get her hands on the ultra-rare sea otter figure from the collection. She complains that the rare prize simply refuses to drop for her, prompting Narita to inspect the pamphlet for the Water's Edge animal collection to see the lineup. Suddenly struck by a brilliant idea, Sasa excitedly suggests that Narita should start collecting the miniatures too. She enthusiastically explains that they can easily trade their duplicates with each other to complete the set in no time, leaving Narita a bit overwhelmed by her sudden burst of energy. Warmly recalling how he used to trade cards back in the day, Narita readily agrees to join her, but asks if she is truly okay with embarking on the collection journey with him. Sasa sulks, asking if she really looks like she has anyone else to trade toys with, which immediately sends a panicked Narita into damage control, as he frantically apologizes for the misunderstanding. While she acknowledges she could potentially ask her co-workers on set to trade, Sasa admits she genuinely hates feeling like she is making other people go out of their way just to accommodate her. Sasa quietly shifts her focus back to her chores, trying to distract herself by getting her laundry started. Sensing how much she wants a trading partner, Narita warmly speaks up and tells her to count him in on the toy collection hobby. Sasa is absolutely thrilled by his sudden support, her face lighting up with excitement, as Narita confirms that trading duplicates actually sounds like a lot of fun. Completely energized, Sasa generously offers him any of her numerous duplicate nutrias, though Narita politely clarifies that a single figure is more than enough. Accepting his response, Sasa packs the rest of her duplicates back into her bag, casually noting she will just have to take them all home instead. As she heads out the door, Sasa cheerfully asks him to update her on his collection progress the next time they meet, leaving Narita realizing he has officially committed to a brand new hobby. On his way home, Narita finds himself reflecting on their conversation and the unexpected turn his evening took. Eventually, Narita gives in to the temptation and stops at a capsule toy machine, eagerly turning the dial to buy his very first figure for their trade partnership. Thinking the price is a bit steep, Narita decides to buy a capsule anyway and watches as his very first toy drops from the machine. To his absolute shock, Narita manages to pull the ultra-rare sea otter on his very first try, immediately planning to smugly brag to Sasa about his incredible beginner's luck. The next day at his restaurant job, Narita keeps his newly won sea otter figure right on his desk for inspiration while he tackles his back-end computer chores. While Narita is busy typing away, Remy knocks on his office door to check in on him. Remy cheerfully steps inside to greet him with a bright good morning, which Narita warmly returns as he pauses his work. Remy suddenly freezes in pure shock as she notices the miniature sea otter figure resting on his desk, leaving Narita completely confused by her intense reaction. Remy excitedly explains that those water-themed capsule toys are incredibly popular right now, though Narita is genuinely surprised to hear that the collection is such a massive hit. The rest of his co-workers quickly crowd around the office door to gossip in utter disbelief over the fact that Narita actually managed to pull the legendary ultra-rare sea otter. A coworker asks if he knows the famous idol Sasa, eagerly pulling out her phone to show him Sasa's official social media posts about trying to collect the exact same toy series. Staring at Sasa's viral post, Narita is highly amused to see a picture of her hilarious army of duplicate nutrias alongside her desperate captions complaining about her relentless bad luck. Remy explains that Sasa's social media posts actually set off a massive trend, making it incredibly popular for young girls everywhere to collect these specific animal figures. Narita is quietly stunned by her massive reach, realizing that Sasa has some serious, undeniable influence over her audience. Later that evening at the coin laundry, Sasa rattles the door open and cheerfully greets Narita as they cross paths once again. Sasa eagerly asks how his new collection is coming along, only for a sheepish Narita to admit he hasn't really been buying any, prompting a smug Sasa to brag that she has actually collected quite a few since their last chat. Narita admits that spending 500 yen per pull is a little too steep for his budget, a point that Sasa reluctantly agrees with since they really aren't cheap. Agreeing that the high price makes completing the set way more rewarding, Sasa starts rummaging through her bags to show off the new rare figures she pulled right as Narita quietly brings out his own toy. Sasa proudly shows off her new capybara and platypus figures, but as she goes to dig for more, she suddenly freezes in absolute shock when she looks up at Narita. Sasa completely loses her mind, screaming in utter disbelief upon realizing that Narita is casually holding the legendary ultra-rare sea otter. Flaunting his insane like a smug, Narita gives her a playful smirk and casually brags that he pulled the ultra-rare figure like it was absolutely nothing. Sasa squeals in pure agonizing jealousy, but her soul completely exits her body the second she registers that he got it on his very first pull, while she has spent a small fortune on duplicates. Narita smugly jokes that he just has the magic touch, and that pulling rare items comes naturally to him. This completely sets Sasa off, making her throw a massive, frustrated tantrum as she curses her luck and whines that she was supposed to be one of the chosen ones too. Quickly changing her tune, Sasa eagerly wiggles up to him and asks if there is absolutely anything he would be willing to trade for the little otter figure. Narita is completely caught off guard by her sudden intensity, internally sweating as he admits he would genuinely just give it to her without a second thought. Determined to get her hands on the prize, she confidently offers him a high-value 3-for-1 trade instead of a basic 1-for-1 swap. Narita is visibly startled by her generous offer and hesitantly asks if she is really sure about giving up that much. She fiercely insists that the deal is completely fair and dramatically slams down a massive bag, inviting him to peruse her extensive collection. Narita stares into the bag in absolute awe, totally blown away by the sheer amount of merchandise she has accumulated. As Narita carefully digs through the bag to pick his 3 figures, Sasa watches with an incredibly smug grin, silently mocking him for being a clueless amateur who simply doesn't understand the true market value of the otter. Her silent gloating is interrupted when Narita finally pulls out his selections. He proudly reveals his haul of a walrus and 2 different sea lions, leaving Sasa utterly baffled. She immediately calls him out, asking why on earth he would pick 3 figures that look almost exactly the same out of her entire massive collection. Narita simply hands over the tiny otter to finalize the trade. Sasa happily accepts her long-awaited prize, shrugging off his weird choices by deciding that if those specific 3 marine animals spoke to his heart, then she is perfectly fine with the deal. Sasa then casually compliments his surprisingly good taste, revealing that the walrus he picked out is actually a pretty rare pull. She mentions that one of her friends has actually been desperately hunting for that exact one. Holding up his newly acquired walrus, Narita points out that she clearly does know other people who collect the series. He quietly recalls her earlier sad claim about having absolutely no friends to trade with, and internally admits he is actually a little jealous of her hobby buddies. Sasa is totally caught off guard by his pouty reaction and suddenly realizes that he is actually genuinely jealous. She completely panics internally, becoming wildly flustered as she wonders if he seriously thinks she just invites anyone off the street to her niche interests with her. Sasa is desperately trying to clear the air, quickly explaining to Narita that the person she got to know at the studio is definitely a woman, and that their connection started purely when they went out for drinks. Narita barely gives her a reaction, letting out a tired sigh, and simply asking if that is really the case, which completely catches Sasa off guard and leaves her deeply confused by his total lack of interest. Sasa fidgets nervously as she explains that the woman called her Sakin and wanted to trade duplicate toys since they both collect them, quickly assuring Narita that she was never trying to leave him out of the loop, only for a curious Narita to ask if other people actually call her by that nickname. Flustered and blushing, Sasa tries to play it cool by claiming she does not actually care about the nickname at all, while Narita quietly chuckles in the background, amused by her obvious embarrassment. As the washing machine beeps to signal the end of the cycle, Narita prepares to head out and thanks her for the 3 toy figures, but Sasa immediately begins rummaging through her bag to pull something else out. Sasa holds out her absolute favorite toy figure, which is a tiny beaver, insisting that Narita should keep it and take care of it for her. She explains that since she really wanted the otter toy, giving him her favorite beaver is her way of showing her appreciation, leaving a surprised Narita to double-check if she is absolutely sure about parting with her favorite collectible. With a grateful smile, Narita accepts the tiny gift, quietly thanking her as she places the beaver figure right into his hand. Walking home under the streetlights, Narita looks over the small beaver figure and happily decides to find a nice spot for it in his bathroom. The quiet night at the coin laundry finally comes to an end, leaving behind a peaceful evening and a brand new little keepsake for Narita. Holding up a tiny turtle charm in her hand, Sasa quietly admires the little keepsake with a warm, incredibly tender smile, finding immense comfort in the sweet reminder of her late-night laundromat companion.